Corporate megastores are spending millions lobbying D.C. politicians on one-sided policies that send small businesses tumbling. They want to enact harmful credit card mandates that take resources away from your local credit union and community bank, leaving Main Street businesses with less access to credit, making it harder for your family to pay for everyday goods like gas and groceries. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
A warmer puppy hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, St. Hornung. He does such great work over at Your Betting News. We're going to chat with him about the top teams in college basketball showing a little bit of separation from the rest of the field. We'll talk about the dynamic of handicapping these games over the next few days with many students off campus for these home games, and we're going to dive into some of the games that we've got for Sunday as well. In the final segment, gonna get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better, is making it all the better to be able to dive in on some daily fantasy. They make it easier than ever. All you need to do for daily fantasy is take a look at a player's stat line, determine whether or not they're going to go over or under it, and you're all good to go, and you get $10 free by being a listener to this podcast. Just go to BETR.app and you type in the promo code of VSINPOD, VSINPOD. That gets you $10 free to be able to get all started, and let's get started on taking a look back at what was a fun day in college basketball on Saturday. Tried to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Texas Tech takes down Duke, 82-81 the final. Texas Tech was down 10 points at the half. JT Toppin and Lawan Watts were able to power this team to victory along Christian Anderson. Anderson, 27 points. He goes 5 of 9 from 3. Watts, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Toppin, another double-double, 19 points, 10 rebounds. And Duke just absolutely shot themselves in the foot at the free throw line. For Duke, 17 out of 29 at the charity stripe. Cameron Boozer was able to supply the team with 23 points, 7 assists, 8 rebounds, but also did have 4 turnovers. So it was even up in terms of turnover battle, 11-11. Texas Tech, 30-29. They win the rebound battle, and other than Cameron Boozer, none of the other starters scored in double figures for Duke. You did have Caden Boozer come off the bench for 13 points, but guys not named Boozer did not get the job done for Duke, and that means that instead of a B, you get an L for them. They were the losers on Saturday, unfortunately. Sorry, Duke fans. And then for Purdue, well, they were big giant winners over Auburn, 88-60 the final. It's been a, shall we say, topsy-turvy year for Auburn, and they could not guard the arc. For Purdue, 10-10 at the free throw line. Always love to see that. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer made every one of the free throws, but for Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, they went just 1 of 10 from 3. Rest of the team goes 11 of 16 from the outside, as Smith has just 11 points, but he does throw in there 14 assists. Lawyer just 8 points, but CJ Cox 4 of 7 from 3 for 14 points off the bench. Jakari Harris, he goes 4 of 6 from 3. Jack Benter, 3 of 3 from the outside. Trey Kaufman-Renn, 18 points, 6 rebounds, as Purdue wins the rebound battle, 36-25. And for Auburn, they actually win the turnover battle, 11-10, but not much doing out of Todd Pettiford. He only gave the team 5 points, and for Kashan Hall, 14 points, 3 rebounds. They needed much more out of him. And for Houston, typically a very slow and controlled team, they weren't playing slow and controlled in this game. 94-85. They take down Arkansas out there on a neutral court. For Arkansas, 8 of 20 from 3-point range, and Darius Acuff showed up in a big way with 27 points. And Malik Ewan off the bench, 20 points, 9 rebounds. Arkansas actually wins the rebound battle 34-33, but they lose the turnover battle 12-9. And for Houston, a sizzling 11 of 25 from 3-point range. Emmanuel Sharp lived up to his name, 22 points. For Milos Uzan, he goes for 13 points. King Mason Fleming, 21 points as well. So a very nice quality win for Houston, and they had in this game like 40 points in the first 12 minutes. It was absolutely ridiculous there. If you're looking at a non-ranked upset, Liberty on the road, they take down Dayton by a kind of 64-61. For old Liberty Bibberty, they go 8 of 18 from 3. Forte of this Dayton team has been generating turnovers. Liberty just 6 turnovers. Dayton at 10. Dayton goes 9 of 27 from 3-point. And Liberty surprised despite going 4 of 9 at the free throw line, but Liberty had themselves a nice performance out of Caden Metheny, who was able to supply the team with 16 points. So that was a good quality winner for them, and it's been a little bit of a rough season for Kansas State, but Kansas State, they do find a way to be able to get a 106-76 win over South Dakota. So that was one of your harebrained and crazy early games, as we did have quite a few of those as well. And for South Dakota, they did find themselves in this game as only about a 22-point underdog, so unable to cover that. As for Kansas State, this has been a good 3-point shooting team all season long, 12-24 from the outside, with Abdi Bashir going 5-6 from 3, 15 points, and PJ Haggerty continues to do his thing. He was able to give the team 24 points. For Michigan State, no cover in the battle for the great state of Michigan. They do get the outright win, though, 79-70 final over Oakland. Oakland holds in there going 10-22 from 3 points, just 6 of 22 for Michigan State, but Michigan State wins the rebound battle 42-26, and Jackson Kaler 13 points, 13 rebounds, with Michigan State winning the turnover battle 12-11. So they do find a way to be able to avoid the upset, but had some fun Christmas sweaters, the coaches as well. And for Kentucky, it looks like things are getting back on track. They had that nice win about a week ago against Indiana, 78-66. They take down St. John's in the season debut of Jaden Quantance off the bench, 10 points, 8 rebounds, pair of blocks. He was rock solid. Ortega Owe, he was pretty much backcourt for the team, 20 points. And Kentucky wins this game despite going just 4 of 16 from 3-point. St. John's on a lot better, 5 of 19 from 3-point for Kentucky. They actually lose a turnover battle 16-12, but for the St. John's team, they were just unable to get anything going. They shoot 33% from the floor. Jusan Sanan, he had 12 points, all came on free throws, 12 of 12 at the free throw line, 0 of 5 from the floor, but for St. John's, just a little bit of a rough outing out there. And for Kentucky, backcourt has had some issues, but the front court has been rock solid. Louisville laying a big giant number against Montana. They were able to cover that, 94-50 for the final. And for the Louisville defense, they're starting to step up in a big way. As for Montana, they lose their turnover battle 19-14. And as a matter of fact, for Montana, they had 19 turnovers and 17 made field goals. That's just not going to cut it there. And for Louisville, lead scorer in this game was actually Sendandu, hopefully I said that correct, Fru, who was able to give the team 18 points. Team went 12 of 34 from 3, which is pretty pedestrian for them, but they do a tremendous job on defense. They find a way to persevere. They're able to get the job done there. And North Carolina just barely gets the job done, 71-70. They get it done in the last possession as Caleb Olson and Henry Vassar was able to help this team do a rock-solid job down low. For North Carolina, they got out of Wilson 20 points, 15 rebounds, and a trio of blocks. Vassar, 17 points. He throws in their 10 rebounds. Both teams rough with their 3-point shooting. Ohio State 4 of 20 from the outside. North Carolina 8 of 27 from 3, and North Carolina just 7 of 13 at the free throw line, very nearly costed them. But for Ohio State, that 4 of 20 from 3 was costly for them, as Bruce Thornton and John Mobley, they went a combined 2 of 10 from 3, 29 points between the two of them. And for Ohio State, they got as many points off the bench as this podcast, and there has never been anyone not named Greg Peterson that has hosted this podcast. So yeah, that's not great to say the least. In terms of other games around the country, Indiana, no cover against Chicago State. They were laying a massive number, but they get a 78-58 win. Defense is looking pretty rock solid for Indiana. They do go 15 out of 46 from 3-point. Nick Dorn off the bench was 5-11 from the outside. Lamar Wilkerson continues to lead the way in terms of scoring 21 points, so pretty impressive that they were able to win by 20 with Tucker DeVries only being able to get 8 points. And again, it is Chicago State. Howard, a nice underdog winner, 67-66. They're able to take down UNC Wilmington as they went 7 of 16 from 3-point. Bryce Harris, he's really the main man for the team. He did have 5 turnovers, but 11 rebounds, 18 points. He was able to do a nice job in terms of powering the Bison to victory out there in Big East play. Marquette just continues to be sad and pathetic. 84-63 the final, and this is once again the weekly call on this podcast. Shaka Smart, the transfer portal is allowed to be used. You are not going to be penalized. You are not going to be reprimanded if you utilize the transfer portal, and as a matter of fact, the best player that you've had since going to Marquette, that'd be Mr. Cole Lick came via the transfer portal. Feel free to use it because other teams are, and right now you're not. For Creighton, they go 10 of 27 from 3. Looks like they're starting to get online. They had that nice win over Xavier as well. Nick Graves off the bench was their top scorer with 17 points. And for Marquette, well, they play even up with regards to turnover battle, 12 to 12, but they lose a rebound battle, 44 to 37, 11 to 20 at the free throw line. They shoot 34% from the floor, a less than savory effort there for the Golden Eagles. And for Xavier, after they take that loss to Creighton, they bounce back. They take down Georgetown, 80 to 77. The final for Georgetown. They've been really good at taking care of the ball. They win the turnover battle, 14 to 10, but the team went 25 out of 43 at the free throw line. Meanwhile, Xavier was 11 of 14 at the charity stripe. When you lose by 3 and you miss 18 free throws, that's the reason why you lost. And for Georgetown, they actually shot it halfway respectably from 3-point range, 6 of 17 from 3-point range. Xavier was as though having caroling all the way to getting 22 points for Mr. Trey Carroll. So that was able to get the job done for them. Troy is a team that just continues to win and cover, 70 to 63. They take down Marshall in a little bit more of a defense-oriented battle, as for Marshall, 8 of 33 from 3-point range. It was even up with regards to turnover battle, so a nice effort there from Troy. And I know that they didn't win the game outright, but a very good effort out of Elon. They go to overtime against Virginia Tech, 82 to 81 the final. Elon did have an 8-point halftime lead, so they did relinquish that, but Elon was able to play relatively even up on the glass. They lose that turnover battle, 36 to 35, but for Elon, you had in this game Chandler Cottrell be able to do a nice job with 18 points. Virginia Tech just 4 of 14 from 3-point range, still dealing with the injury to Toby Lawal, so that's been a bit of an issue for them, but Amarni Hansberry was able to bail the team out on this day. He was able to supply 20 points and 14 rebounds, so that was an interesting game. And for Georgia Tech, they have been one of the better defenses and one of the lesser offenses in all of college basketball. How about 95 to 81 win but no cover over Lafayette? They go 9 of 16 from 3-point range and 26 out of 30 at the free throw line. 20 points apiece out of Lamar Washington, Akai Flemings, and Kawasi Reeves. You do want to note Bate and Ndongo once again out for Georgia Tech in this game, so something that you very much do want to be monitoring moving forward. And something else that you want to monitor, the fact that Louisiana has been rough with their offense, but finally got it going against Louisiana Monroe, 76 to 62, and a relatively pick-em line. They do find a way to persevere, get the job done. Memphis now 4-7 this year. It's been a rough year for the American, and man, this is an American-sized disappointment from Memphis. They were a 3.5 to a 4-point underdog, so they do not cover this game. And for Memphis, right now the 3-point shooting is just not there. 9 of 31 from the outside. They were able to get 18 points off the bench from Curtis Givens, so he was Givens the team a chance. But for Mississippi State, even though they lose a rebound battle 43 to 35, they did a nice job in terms of being able to win the turnover battle 18 to 15. That has been really the bane of the existence for Memphis under Penny Hardaway, and Jaden Epps 19 points in this game, Joshua Hubbard 17. So Mississippi State, they find a way to persevere. They do get the job done in that one, and also being able to get the job done. Kent State, a low-scoring slog. This game had a total of north of 160, 69 to 59. The final line for Kent State, it appears as though they're starting to slow things down a little bit more. They win the rebound battle 40 to 36 as Delreco Gillespie, 18 points in 20. Got it, 20 rebounds in this game, so that was able to get it done for old Kent State. Syracuse, they get the win, but no cover over Northeastern, 91-83 the final. And Syracuse has been one of your better defensive teams in all of college basketball. They did allow Northeastern to be able to have a lot of clean possessions in this game. Northeastern still loses a turnover battle, 13 to 11, but for Northeastern, 8 of 23 from 3 to be able to hold in there. And Nathan George, he supplies the team with 22 points. We are still waiting to see for Syracuse on a few guys are currently dealing with ailment, as Donnie Freeman being the main one. He has been out of the fold for quite a while, so that's something that I'm very much going to be monitoring. And for Loyola Chicago, they were a massive underdog against Santa Clara. They do find a way to persevere, get the job done, 80 to 78 the final. As for Loyola Chicago, 10 to 27 from 3, and Santa Clara wins the rebound battle 33 to 30. But for Santa Clara, even though they win the turnover battle 9 to 8, they allowed Loyola Chicago to be able to get to the free throw line. Loyola Chicago 18 out of 23 at the charity stripe. And for Loyola Chicago, a nice performance out of Cade Dodson. He was able to supply 26 points, so they do find a way to be able to persevere in what has been a really, really bad year for Loyola Chicago. They finally get something to go right. Being able to go right for Stanford was things out there in the great state of Arizona. 77 to 68. They take down Colorado. Stanford was down 2 at the half, but Stanford, they do a nice job getting to the free throw line at 28 to 41. Colorado just 12 13 at the charity stripe, and Colorado has been a top 20 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage percentage, just 4 of 17 in this one. Stanford has been great with their defensive rebounding. They win that rebound battle 35-28, and the main guy in this game, Abuka Okore, one of the most underrated freshmen in all of college basketball, 32 points, and he went 18 out of 21 at the charity stripe. And if you're looking at a late night slog, Tulane was able to take down Portland State. They do not get the cover, but 63-61. This game was 24-23 at the half, so a little bit underwhelming there. And then Iowa all over Bucknell. Bucknell actually got up in this game 10-2. Iowa closes on a 92-29 run, 94-39. The final is our good friends of Bracket Bus and Bison. 25 turnovers of 15 made field goals. And for Iowa, very balanced effort. Alvaro Figueres, 17 points to lead the way off the bench. And man, for this Iowa team, I'm going to try to do the math in my head as to how many players had 6+ points. I think it was 8, might have been 9. So they had everyone firing on all cylinders out there, and also firing on all cylinders. Grand Canyon, they go to elevation, they go on the road, and they get the job done against Wyoming. This by a count of 82-70 for Wyoming. This team went just 3 of 26 from three-point range, and Grand Canyon 7 of 18 from three-point range after a little bit of a wobbly start to the season for Grand Canyon. Mountain West play starts out very well for them, so a career 1-0 right now for Grand Canyon and Mountain West play, despite the fact that they had lost that turnover battle by a count of 16-12. Do I have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern? We will see what happens in San Diego State versus Arizona. That game was a slog in the first half, but San Diego State was doing a good job of holding in there in a game where neither team got past a 32-point plateau in the first half. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, the under has had a little bit of a lead on overs thus far this season, but things over the last 7 days have been quite overwhelming. Over the last 7 days, with a few very, very late game spending from Saturday, the over rate over the last 7 days has been about 53.8%, 120 overs, 103 unders, and if I'm not mistaken, 2 pushes along the way as well, and favorites have just been getting decimated. Favorites over the last 7 days, 99, 120, and 5 against the spread, hardly hitting above 45%, and overall for the season, favorites still a very slight lead on underdogs against the spread, 956, 940, and 32, so 50.4% is that hit rate for favorites on the spread, and the under rate is right now 50.1%, 956 unders, 952 overs, and 20 pushes. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now. That's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do talk with our good friend Shaggy Betts, a.k.a. Nate Hornung, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
DC politicians want to enact harmful credit card mandates that could take away your cash back and rewards points. Perks that stretch your budget and make life a little easier. Losing these benefits means less money for your family's everyday essentials like gas and groceries. The perks you rely on could disappear, leaving you with higher costs and fewer options. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Nate Hornung aboard. You know him better as Shaggy Betts, who does such a great job taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball and so much more. You're able to follow all of his work in terms of written work along with his shows over at Your Betting News, where I know he does a great job with his show Up Your Units. He is the handler of Kobe Marcio, who is another friend of this fine podcast as well. He does a little bit of everything and does so also well. And you're able to follow Nate on the old Twitter/X at Shaggy_bets. And Nate, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, Greg. Yeah, Colby, he's a wild one, so we got to keep him in check from time to time.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm sure that you're doing an amazing job of it, and you're also doing an amazing job looking at college basketball. And just what has been your reaction to the first month and a half of the season? Because I do feel like, from my perspective, there just seems to be a divide between about the top 5 teams compared to, like, I would say a tier 2 of another 5 teams, and then everyone else behind those, like, top 2 tiers. It just feels like there's really a big divide between those.
Yeah, no, I agree right there with you. We've got obviously the big dogs, Arizona, Michigan, Duke, Iowa State, and then you can kind of have your pick of UConn, Purdue, Gonzaga, any of those guys up there kind of bordering those 2 tiers. And so we have this divide. We kind of have the top dogs, a few guys below them, but no one's really breaking through and really establishing themselves as head and shoulders above the rest. A team I really got my eye on is definitely the Michigan Wolverines. I've come on here and talked about them before, but they look very, very complete from start to finish. Got a great resume so far. So I'll be keeping my eye on Dusty May's team going forward.
Oh, no doubt about it. They have been tremendous, and I do feel like there's really a top 3 that is formed in the Big Ten, and certainly Michigan is number 1, but then you got Purdue and Michigan State. But I do feel like that next tier is going to be interesting, because one team that has really caught my eye is Nebraska. A lot of people, I feel like, are still sleeping on them. They continue to be rock solid, and then it feels like it's a little bit of a mismatch with a UCLA team that has been struggling a little bit. Iowa's been rock solid as we're doing this. They're currently beating up on Bucknell. I don't know if they're going to cover that big of a number, but obviously they've been rock solid. But I do think that it's really interesting to take a look at the teams outside that top 3, because I do feel like Nebraska is starting to separate themselves and becoming sort of that next tier outside those main 3.
You got to tip your cap to Nebraska. And, following the Cornhuskers are a team that I've got a future on, and they actually, just lost to the Cornhuskers, and that's Brad Underwood's squad in Champaign, the Illini. I believe just adding a mid-season transfer as well, an international guy that's going to start playing immediately, just boosts an already really talented Illini squad if they can really figure it out. And speaking on the Big Ten teams that have actually been really disappointing, Dana Altman and the Oregon Ducks just having a horrendous season so far. 0-2 to start in Big Ten play. When they returned Nate Biddle and Jackson Shelstad, I thought they were going to be a sneaky team in this conference, and it is not looking like it early on in the season.
No, it is not, and they are going to be playing a non-conference game on Sunday against Gonzaga. It is going to be out there in the great state of Oregon. It's in Portland, so it should be a little bit more of an Oregon crowd. But, how do you take a look at these 2 teams? Because Gonzaga, I've actually been really impressed with their defense. I know that they lose that game to Michigan, and you don't want to get blown out by 1 trillion points like they did. But other than that game, this has been one of the most impressive teams in all of college basketball. And to your point about Oregon, one of the more disappointing teams in all of college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at this game specifically, I'm probably going to lay the 12.5 with Gonzaga, what I'm seeing right now. I know this game's in Oregon, but it'll still feel plenty 50-50 split in the crowd. And, looking at Oregon and who they've played, they had those 5 losses all in a row, all against teams with a pulse. Auburn, San Diego State, Creighton, if you count the Blue Jays, USC and UCLA, they haven't shown up against a good team yet this season. Why should I think any differently against a team like Gonzaga, who, you said it, has been absolutely rock solid defensively, a very, very experienced, mature team led by veterans who have been playing college basketball for a while. Again, that 1 loss to Michigan, you don't want to get blown out by that much, but we talked about how good this Michigan team is. They have other wins over Alabama, Kentucky, a team that's finding their stride. So I think Gonzaga is going to be just fine. I think they're going to roll right over the Ducks on Sunday. So I'm willing to lay that 12.5.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I wouldn't want to go much past the 12.5, but I am willing to lay that myself. And Gonzaga is one of those teams I think could be able to sneak into that tier 1 when it's all said and done. And I think that it is interesting to take a look at some of those other teams as well, like a Louisville, who I recognize that they lose that game to Tennessee, but I do think that they have a chance to be able to ascend. I recognize that they have beaten up on some lesser competition, but they're a team that I've been very impressed with as well. And I mentioned this team a little bit in passing as well, but I feel like a lot of people are still sleeping on Michigan State, maybe because they're not putting up like 100 billion points, and maybe because their games are a little bit closer. But I look at that team and the way that they're playing playing defense, and I feel like that's a team that nobody in all of college basketball wants to play against.
Oh yeah, 100%. Colby and I have actually gotten our eye on this Spartans team because they are kind of sneaking under the radar. They're not high and fast and flashy and super high-powered offensively. They just play super sound fundamental basketball. We saw that when they beat Arkansas at home. We saw that in the Champions Classic against Kentucky, and then we saw them dismantle a North Carolina team on Thanksgiving week. So that one loss to Duke at home, Duke, another team that's pretty much in that top tier. So that's a forgivable loss in my eyes, even being at home. So Michigan State, if they keep cruising like this, Izzo's team is going to be tough to beat come tourney time.
Yep, I am right there with you, as we do have our good friend Nate Hornung, better known as Shaggy Betts, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we do have some very fun games that are going to be going down on Sunday. And we've talked a little bit about disappointments in all of college basketball. I really thought this was a put up or shut up year for Wes Miller. He decides to crank his team up tempo, and it doesn't seem to be working. Yay, verily, to a nice win over Alabama State, but that's Alabama State. Now they face off against Clemson on Sunday. This is going to be technically a neutral court game, but how do you take a look at this with Clemson being a 6.5-point favorite? Because I feel like Cincinnati going up tempo has been a big mistake, because I actually like their defense, but their offense is so sloppy that they become hard to trust.
You said it exactly. They're too fast for their own good. They're scoring, I believe 75 points a game, but they're not doing that because they're shooting the ball so well. They're not doing that because they're super efficient offensively. They're just doing that because they're getting so many possessions up and down the floor. But you said it. You've got two very, very defensive-minded teams. They're both better on that side of the ball. The Clemson Tigers run incredibly slow, 327th in the country in pace. That's bottom 40. It is a neutral site game. I feel like it's definitely going to feel like a Clemson Tigers home game. So I feel like they're going to have a better chance at controlling that pace and really slowing this game down. I'll be looking at the under 137.5. I'm not totally sure if I'm going to take it yet. But I do also like Clemson to cover that 6.5 number, because I definitely trust their offense a little bit more than I do the Bearcats, and both defenses are rock solid. So give me a low-scoring game. I'll probably be looking at the under, but I think Clemson can get it done in what should feel like a home game for them.
And I do think that teams like Cincinnati are so interesting, because I think that when it's all said and done, Wes Miller is going to realize that his job is on the line and they're going to get back to their roots. How much do you take a look at things like this with teams that maybe underwent a little bit of change in the offseason? Things are not working and they try to get back to happy, like a Cincinnati or a team that they are going to be in action on Saturday. Before we are doing this before they played, but a team like a San Diego State, where I feel like they've gotten a little bit too fast for their own good, much like in many non-conference slates, and then they slow things down when it gets to conference play.
You actually brought up another team, San Diego State, that it's totally changed. Using a phrase from my good friend Colby, this is not your older brother's San Diego State Aztecs team that was very, very slow and very, very defensive-minded. They play a lot faster now. And again, much like the Bearcats, I think they're just a little too fast for their own shoes. And now going up against the Arizona Wildcats team that is very, very comfortable playing that fast. I laid the 13.5 with Arizona. I think they'll win this game by 15. But again, yeah, that Aztecs team not playing like the team we might have seen in the past. They play much, much faster, but I don't think it's helping them out very much.
And just along those lines as well, how surprised have you been at just the lack of wins that the Mountain West has, for lack of a better term? Because it just feels like the Mountain West has been one of the more disappointing conferences in all of college basketball. I recognize that a team like UNLV has dealt with some injuries, and we didn't have high expectations for Fresno State or Air Force to start with, but Grand Canyon took some bad losses. Wyoming has actually been a relatively pleasant surprise. Colorado State took it on the chin against Utah State, but Utah State has been one of the very few teams that have actually lived up to their billing. But it just feels like across the board in the Mountain West, headlined by Boise State losing to a team that is in the Division II ranks in a strip mall, losing on their home floor. This has just not been a great year for the conference in general.
I love Mountain West basketball, late night out in the mountains. This is a league that a couple of years ago we were arguing how many teams should they get into the tournament? 5, 6? Could we even see a 7th Mountain West team into the tournament? I believe just a couple years ago, and that is just definitely not the case from what we're seeing on the court this year. Teams typically that have been very good, like San Diego State, like Colorado State, like Boise, they're definitely underperforming so far this season. And you said it, I'm not letting anyone forget that Boise State lost to a non-Division I school to start the year. So it's definitely been disappointing for the Mountain West as a whole. Utah State, a little diamond in the rough there. But, as a guy that's got a soft spot for Mountain West basketball as a whole, I really hope the conference turns things around.
And the irony of it is, in regards to net rankings, Boise State will not be hurt by that loss to Hawaii Pacific, which I feel like you should be hurt doubly for that personally.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's not great to say the least, especially when you bring up a strip ball. Like, you get 3 times talked when they're in a strip ball, only 2 times if it's a normal Division II team. Right. But that's a discussion for a different day. Zane Hornung, better known as Shaggy Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly we've been seeing some Mountain West Conference play over the last few days, and it's going to be interesting to see how things are going to be able to form there. But we also do have ourselves some very interesting non-conference games. A lot of, shall we say, bigger lines, like Iowa State is going to be playing us at Long Beach State. They're going to be like a 1 trillion point favorite. We mentioned Nebraska against North Dakota, where Nebraska is about a 30 or so point favorite as well. How do you take a look at these late games going into Christmas break? Because I do feel like out of all the times in the season, the most value that you're going to have on these big underdogs is right now, where it's the last game before Christmas. You don't necessarily have a lot of kids on campus, and it feels like some of these guys are going to be looking forward a little bit more to the holiday, while these mid-major teams are seeing it as their last opportunity to be able to make a sort of statement before they get lost in the abyss of conference play.
No, you absolutely said it. I mean, you've got to look at these big teams. Like, I'm taking a look at Michigan tomorrow against LaSalle, like facing the Explorers. And
39 and a half. Jeez.
They're laying a lot of points there. And I'd probably be willing to back the Explorers on the line there, just because they're not a team that gets up and down the floor. They're just going to stay nice and patient and slow tempoed like they like to play. And you said it. You've got an Ann Arbor environment that's got the students away from campus. They're back home for the holidays. These home arenas don't have the same aura that they would have during these early months of the season. I mean, you've got to look at these big spreads. I think some of these bigger teams could be checked out a little bit. They've gotten through the hard non-conference schedule. They've gotten through Feast Week. Now it's time to kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit before you get ready for conference play. So this could definitely be the time to attack those big underdogs like you kind of alluded to.
Absolutely. A team like an Oklahoma State laying over 20 points to Cal State Fullerton is another one that is going to be on the radar as well. So that's going to be very fascinating. And this one I think is going to be a fun one as well, because we've got one team that had a lot of hype coming into the season, and I would say it's neither here nor there on NC State. They didn't necessarily look the world's greatest out there in Maui, but overall I haven't necessarily loved what I've seen. I haven't hated what I've seen. Ole Miss has been a little bit of a disaster thus far this season. This is going to be from the campus of Greensboro, if I'm not mistaken, out there in Greensboro, North Carolina. So a little bit more of a NC State crowd with them being a 6.5 point favorite. How do you look at a spot like this where we know that Chris Beard typically gets the most out of their teams, but we also know that AJ Storr has not necessarily been the world's greatest team guy. And with NC State, it does feel like they're a team that's trying to find their bearings with Will Wade chewing out his team after a 36-point win, which I thought was hilarious.
Ole Miss is a team that I just don't really have faith in yet this year. Their best win on their resume, looking at it, is against the Memphis Tigers at home. Away from home, they really have not done much. Losses to Iowa, Utah, Miami, St. John's. I would definitely be willing to back the Wolfpack in this situation. They've competed against tougher teams as well, almost beating the Kansas Jayhawks at home just a couple of games ago. So I think NC State might be able to cover the spread and win this one. And again, what should maybe feel like more of a home environment for the Wolfpack. So give me Will Wade's squad laying the points in this one.
Yep, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get there, and we do have a pretty nice card for Sunday. Typically, Sundays are a little bit more of a sleepy spot, but we had a little bit of a thinner but funner Saturday, and I recognize that funner is not a word, but I made it up on the fly, but we do have ourselves quite a few games. Anything else that might be standing out for you for Sunday that you're looking at?
We have pretty much talked about all of it, but in the spirit of my good friend Colby Marcio, I got to bring up the UConn Huskies taking on the DePaul Blue Demons at Wintrust Arena in Chicago. This is probably going to be a bloodbath, in my opinion. Not much more to it. I think UConn really could lay the hammer down, minus the 14.5 against the DePaul team that just has not been good this season. So Colby Marcio, I'm sorry, man, but I think the Huskies are getting it done on Sunday.
Not been great for DePaul, to say the least. When you get hammered at home against Buffalo, that's not necessarily what you want to be seeing. Now, we do know that some of these big favorites have a little bit of a tough time with it, but man, I set UConn as about a 2-touchdown favorite myself. We're going to need to go a little bit higher for me to be able to take the points as well, and I do think that UConn defense is going to be rock solid, just like a man who is oh so rock solid as you, Nate. You do such tremendous work over at Your Betting News. You do a great job on the college football front, college basketball, and so much more. So love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yep, absolutely. You can follow me on all socials at Shaggy_bets. Catch me and Colby Marcio yapping with each other every single Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern at Your Betting News. Catch all my written work at bettingnews.com as well. Cover everything you need. College sports. We've got some soccer in there. We'll have playoff hockey when that goes around. So whatever you guys need, I'm your guy.
Absolutely. And Nate, he's doing such a tremendous job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, with such great insight. So a big thanks to Nate for joining me on Cuss He's now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big shots.
DC politicians want to enact harmful credit card mandates that could take away your cash back and rewards points. Perks that stretch your budget and make life a little easier. Losing these benefits means less money for your family's everyday essentials like gas and groceries. The perks you rely on could disappear, leaving you with higher costs and fewer options. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuss Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Nate Hornung. You know him better as Shaggy Bets over there at Your Betting News. He does an excellent job looking at this wonderful game of college basketball every single time he joins me. Lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Nate for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving two power conference teams first, and then the games at the bottom are going to be games involving teams from these conferences: the Patriot League, the America East, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, the Atlantic Sun, the Southland. I believe that I have got them all. So how about if we do get things kicked off here? It is 7:07, 7:08 on the card. Neutral court game between Penn State and Pittsburgh from the great state of Pennsylvania. Right now, Pittsburgh is between a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite to a 1 to a 1.5 point underdog, depending upon where you're looking. And the total on this game is between 146.5 to a 147.5. And with Penn State, I did set them as a 2-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take Penn State, whether that be as a very slight favorite or a very slight underdog. With Penn State, this has been one of the best teams in all of college basketball in terms of taking care of the ball, as they are a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And for Pittsburgh, they just haven't necessarily done the world's greatest job with their own offense. They are well outside the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, for Pittsburgh, they're okay at taking care of the ball. They're about country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They're not forcing the issue at all on defense, outside the top 250 in terms of generating turnovers. And for this Pittsburgh team, they've been a country average team down low, about 173rd in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. They are looking to build themselves with being able to get second and third chances with Cam Corn, give you about 13.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. And then you've been able to have Barry Dunning Jr., Gator Dunning, with 13 points, 5 boards, and he's been able to shoot about 40% from three. Pittsburgh as a whole, they do shoot about 36% from the outside, and this is a Penn State team that year in and year out, they are one that is going to gamble for turnovers a little bit, and Penn State does leave themselves a bit vulnerable on the inside. For Penn State, they are 290th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but this has still been a team that has been in the the top 75 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and the freshman Emily Tunka, along with Kaden Mingo, have really stepped up a combined 27 points per game. Mingo gives you 2 steals, 4.5 assists per game, and Tunka shoots 44% from the outside, while Freddie De Leon, 14 points. He shoots 38.5% from the outside. Now, for Penn State, they don't have a single player that gives you over 4.1 rebounds per game, but they're still not giving up a lot of second and third chances. They have been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. I think with the way that Penn State is looking to slow things down, and frankly, both of these teams are looking to slow things down, as for Pittsburgh, they are outside the top 330 right now in terms of total possessions per game. Penn State more around 255th, and with the way that Penn State is coming up with turnovers, they do find a way with that backcourt to be able to get the job done in a little bit more of a sloppy game. Semi-total at a 144, so I do like the under, and I'm going to be willing to take Penn State, whether that be as a very slight favorite or an underdog. 7-9, 7-10 on the card. It is Northern Kentucky. They play us to Charleston. Charleston is a underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. Your total is 150.5 to 151.5, and set a total of 145. I do like the under. For Charleston, they have really slowed down their pace this season, mainly because they've been dealing with injuries to Kobe Duggan, Mr. Dean, and a few others. They do get back one of their main men, and Connor Hickman in the backcourt has been leading the way with about 14 to 15 points per game since his return, but still, team that's only about 154th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. 309th in their three-point shooting percentage, has taken a massive fall off, and they're 251st in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Kentucky is a mid-tempo team, 143rd in terms of total possessions per game, but the name of the game for them is turnovers. A top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, it is a team that gambles for turnovers, and that if they don't generate a turnover, they're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they've had Keel Robinson and Dan Grenzinger both supply over 16 points per game, and Robinson is shooting 46% from the outside. LJ Wells is the only guy on the roster that really gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, but he's been very versatile. 13.5 points, pair of assists, 2 steals, 8 boards, doesn't necessarily pop it from 3, and Northern Kentucky shoots 34.5% from 3. That's right around country average. They're looking to pile drive the ball down low, and they have been a top 125 team in terms of their rebound percentage. They go up against a Charleston unit that it just feels like everything has been a bit disjointed with this team. That's just the way that I look at things. They had a tough time with the Citadel a few days ago. It's a unit that is about country average with regards to rebound percentage. You've had Jalen Counter be able to step up and counter what has been going wrong. 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. And then Christian Reeves, who comes over from Clemson, he's been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. But I mean, all the injuries have really been taking a toll on this Charleston team. As a result, they just haven't been the same offense. Still not turning the ball over time. Top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but I do think that in the end, Northern Kentucky does enough to be able to get the job done. I do think that that defensive pressure is going to take it out of a bit of a short-handed Charleston team. So I did set a total of a 145. I like the under with Northern Kentucky. Made them 3-point favorite, willing to lay up to 2.5 with them. 7-11, 7-12 on the card. It is Hofstra, and they play us to Quinnipiac. The Bobcats are a 6.5-point underdog. So on this game, it is 147.5 to a 148.5. Set Quinnipiac as a 7.5-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with Hofstra. Hofstra, a pretty impressive win about a week or so ago against Syracuse, and for Hofstra, they are going to have the best player in this game, and that's no knock to what you're going to be able to get on the flip side of Amari Monroe, who last year gave this Quinnipiac team 19 points, 8 rebounds per game. A little bit down with that, but still 15-plus points, 6-plus rebounds. He's been solid, but Cruz Davis, 21 points, 5.3 assists on 44.3% three-point shooting. For Hofstra team has been very rock solid with their outside shooting. Top 75 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They're okay in terms of generating second and third chances, but where they really shine down low is actually with their two-point shooting defense. This team is back in the top 35 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage with victory. Antinu giving you about 8 rebounds, 7.5 points, a little bit over a block per game. Silas Sunday, a true 7-footer, 5 points, 5 rebounds. He's been able to give you darn near a block per contest as well. And then in the backcourt, James Patterson comes over from Iona. He's been a nice mixer and shaker, 10 points, 5.5 boards, mid-30s three-point shooter. Preston Eadman takes the load off of Davis as well with about 5 assists, 13.5 points per game. And on the other side of things, this is a Quinnipiac unit that has been much more efficient on offense this year as they've cut down on the turnovers. Top 150 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and you've got a pair of teams that they're going to play fast, but they're not going to play like just ridiculous. Right now for Quinnipiac, about 105th in terms of total possessions per game. Hofstra actually now playing at a much slower pace. They're about 280th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for this Quinnipiac team, it's actually been Jaden Zimmerman leading the way with his scoring. 17 points, not necessarily the greatest three-point shooter, but the ancillary guys have been very good. Asim Jones, who comes over from Florida A&M, 10.5 points. He shoots 58% from three-point range. Keith, give me just one more. McKnight gives you about 10.5 points, 5 rebounds, steal and a half per contest, and this is a Quinnipiac team that has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They do a nice job not putting teams on the free throw line, but they do leave themselves a little bit vulnerable to giving up second and third chances outside the top 225 in terms of that defensive edge. And I do think that for Hofstra, having Cruz Davis out there, the way that he's been able to dole out the ball and the way that this Hofstra team has been able to execute on offense, going to be just enough to be able to get the job done. Set a total of a 147.5. Hofstra has been slowing things down a little bit more, and Quinnipiac generates some turnovers as well. So in on the under and a mullet to lay up to 7 with the pride of Hofstra. Sub 13, 7-14 on the card from Greensboro Coliseum. NC State and Mississippi do battle. Ole Miss is an underdog of 6.5 points on this game, 146.5 to a 147.5. Technically a neutral court game, but let's call what it is. This is going to be an NC State crowd, and with NC State, I did set them as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Talked about this with our good friend Nate Hornung, and for Ole Miss, it just feels like things are a little bit disjointed with this team. They're still doing a relatively solid job in terms of taking care of the ball. They're a solid shooting team, shooting about 35.5% from 3, as AJ Soar is actually shooting 47% from 3. He's been able to supply 13 points per game, but they just don't have a lot down low. Malik Diaz is the only guy in the roster with over 5 rebounds per game, and I understand that it's a Chris Beard style that has a lot of positionless basketball, but I do feel like they need a little bit more of someone like a James Scott, who's only giving you about 4.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Diaz, 6.5 boards, 14 points. He shoots about 32% from 3-point range, but as a result, this team has been really losing the rebound battle outside the top 125 in terms of rebound percentage. Now, for Ole Miss, they've been a top 175 team in terms of generating turnovers, and it's an NC State team that they're going to play fast, but they're not necessarily going to get like ridiculously fast, about 130th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Ole Miss is looking to play at a little bit more of a control pace. For our good friends over there in Mississippi, they clock in terms of total possessions per game more around about 283rd, but NC State has been a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Paul McNeil, he had that 47-point game a few nights ago. He's been able to shoot over 40% for 3 with 14 points per game. As a matter of fact, for the NC State team, each of your top 5 scorers are all shooting at least 41% from 3-point range. Ben Allen Lubin has been one of them, 13 points, 7.5 boards, very underrated big man for NC State. They're not necessarily going to grab a bunch of second and third chances, but they've also been a top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. A little bit vulnerable on the inside. NC State outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they're winning the turnover battle. NC State, a top 25 team in terms of protecting the ball. Top 80 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with Kedir Copeland being the do-it-all guy. 14 points, 5.5 assists. He's shooting 55% for 3. And then Darian Williams, the highly touted transfer, 16 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. These guys are all working in tandem with one another, even with some like a Jerry Dang dealing with injury. They've still been rock solid down low, and I do think that NC State gets the job done against an Ole Miss team that has been just a little bit suspect this year, especially on the defensive side of things. So I did set a total of a 148.5. You're at the 147.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay with NC State. 7-15, 7-16 on the card. Stony Brook is on the road against Marist. Marist is a 4.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is 135.5. And with Marist, I did set them as an 8 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Marist just year in and year out, one of the top defensive teams in all of college basketball. Each out of the last 3 seasons, they have been a top 65 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And when you get at home, you're just not going to be able to get clean looks whatsoever against this Marist team, as currently in their home games are a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, back at the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And it's a Stony Brook team that has been pretty solid with regards to their interior defense in games played away from home. They've actually been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but this is not necessarily a team that's going to be putting you under a whole bunch of duress. For Stony Brook, this team is about country average in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they've left themselves a little bit vulnerable from the outside. So I do think that Marist is going to be able to find a way to get it done. As Stony Brook, they're now built around 2 transfers that have come into the backcourt. Eric Pratt from UW Milwaukee, 18.5 points, 4.5 boards, not necessarily the greatest 3-point shooter, and Rob Brown, who comes over from Nichols, more around a 33% 3-point shooter, 10.5 points. With Pratt, he also gives you a steal and a half per contest. But for the Stony Brook team, they've been outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, and for the Stony Brook team, they're allowing teams to shoot over 32% from 3-point range, so you do have some concerns there. And for Marist, this team has been able to do a very rock-solid job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances in terms of their overall rebound percentage, a top 125 team. And for Marist, it's a whole greater than some of its parts effort, with 3 different guys give you between 11.5 and 13 points per game. Elijah Lewis, Rayshon Blackwell, and Justin Bernard. Bernard, that main facilitator, with 4.3 assists, 1.8 steals, about 11.5 points on 37.5% 3-point shooting. Lewis gives you about 4.5 boards, 2 assists, 13 points per game. At Blackwell, very similar numbers, 12.5 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, per game, but then you've got some nice mixing and shaking with Jaden Daughtry down low being able to supply a little bit over 5 rebounds per game. Marist, a very slow and controlled team, as is Stony Brook. Stony Brook is about 276th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Marist, one of the sloggiest bases in the country. They're actually up to 246th. That's actually very fast compared to what they were a season ago, but still doing a nice job holding up on defense. And with Marist, they're not going to give you a lot of free throw attempts. They themselves don't get to the free throw line a ton. They're outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their overall possessions that ended a free throw, but I do think that with Marist, they're going to be able to do a nice job winning this game from within with that interior defense. So I did set my line at 8. I'm willing to lay with Marist, and I like the under. Set my total out of 130. 7-17, 7-18 on the card. Vanderbilt is on the road against Wake Forest. Wake Forest is a home underdog of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 158.5 to 168.5 is the total, and as a Vanderbilt as a 3.5 point favorite. So at 4+, I'm willing to take those points with Wake Forest. Wake Forest has really been able to ascend with their offense, and Wake Forest playing a whole heck of a lot faster than a season ago as well. 55th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Vanderbilt, they're more around about 25th, and for Vanderbilt, this has been a team that has been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers. A top 70 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in a road/court environment. A lot of that is thanks to Frankie Collins, who comes over from Arizona State, TCU, and many others. Doesn't give you a lot of scoring with about 7.5 points per game, but 4.7 assists, 2.5 steals per game off the bench. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of setting up the other guys that really bomb it from 3, like Tyler Tanner, Tyler Nickel. These two guys combined for 31 points per game, and they both shoot over 43% from 3. Duke Miles has been able to generate 2.5 steals, 4.5 assists, 17 points per game as well, and it's a much improved team in Vanderbilt on the glass. Devin McLaughlin is still giving you 7 rebounds per game, but bringing in Jalen Washington, block and a half, 5.5 rebounds per game. I love what he's able to bring to the table. And then on the flip side for Wake Forest, this team does have Trayvon Spillers, who's been able to do a nice job down low, and he's now been able to give you a little bit of outside shooting, not a ton, but he's able to give you 13.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. And for this Wake Forest team, pretty solid in terms of being able to win that rebound battle as well. They're a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage, absolutely cutting teams off from 3. They are daring you to shoot threes, as they're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 3. Teams are shooting less than 30% from the outside against them, and for Wake Forest, they're really generating turnovers. They're a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced out of per possession basis, with Juke Harris supplying 20 points, 7 boards, stealing out per contest on a mid-30s 3-point shooting percentage. Miles Colvin has all of a sudden been able to go off, comes in from Purdue, 13.5 points, 4 boards. He's right now shooting 40% from 3, and he had that 33 spot against Queens NC a few days ago. I do think that with Wake Forest, being able to match the overall turnovers that you get out of Vanderbilt, and this Vanderbilt team, even though they are much improved down low, they still are a little bit vulnerable on the inside as well. They're going to give up a few second and third chances, and I do think that for both of these teams, they are going to be really looking to push tempo, that you are going to get a high-scoring expose. Semi-total 163.5. I like the over and the points here with Wake Forest. 7-19, 7-20 on the card. It is Alabama playing against Kennesaw St. We give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. And in a neutral court game, it's pretty much a home game for Alabama. 21.5 to 22.5 point favorites. Totals between 178.5 to 181.5. And for Alabama, I set them as 22.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. For Kennesaw State, they beat up on a lot of non-Division I teams. So if you look at the raw stats and you don't separate it out in terms of just Division I numbers, they look like one of the most impressive teams in all of college basketball, when in reality, not necessarily quite as much of that. For Kennesaw State, they're still doing a relatively solid job of being able to give themselves second and third chances, but they're not really forcing the issue in terms of generating turnovers, and Alabama certainly is not. For Kennesaw State, more around about 212th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Alabama outside the top 340, but the one thing that Alabama has been able to do a relatively okay job of is not allowing a lot of clean looks from 3-point range. Alabama allowing teams only shoot about 31.5% from 3-point range. For Kennesaw State, that number is more around about 33.5%, and that goes up to 37.3% in a road/court venue. And we all know what Alabama's looking to do. They're looking to pop it and lock it from 3-point range, with LeBaron and Filan leading the way, 22.5 points, 5.5 assists from 3-point range. He is shooting about 43%. You've had Aiden Holloway shoot 43% from the outside, 16.5 points per game. He missed a little bit of time, so getting him back was big. Latrell Wrightsell has dealt with a little bit of injury, but he's back as well. Another guy that's able to give you double figures. He's only been able to shoot about 30% from 3. Should be going northward. Now, where Alabama's a little bit vulnerable is on the post, as they have been giving up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and that's going to be Kennesaw's best chance of being able to hold in there, as you've got Brandon Skip-to-My-Lou, who's been able to do a nice job down low. He's been supplying 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, while Simeon Cottle is one of the more underrated guards that you're going to find in the country. Shoots 44% from 3, 19 points per game. It is a Kennesaw team that has been a top 40 40 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots are resulting in offensive rebounds. So I do think that you're going to get a high scoring expose. I did as a result of my total at a 182.5. So I'm going to be in on the over. As we know, with Alabama, still not necessarily the world's greatest offensive team. They're a little bit better than they were a season ago, but still do have to have some question marks with Kennesaw State only shooting about 30.5% from three-point range against Division I teams. I think that in a game that's going to be very up and down, both of these teams in the top 25 in terms of total possessions per game, Alabama just ends up being able to run away with it. Semi-line at 22.5, willing to lay with Alabama, and I like the over semi-total at 182.5, 721, 722 on the card. Southern Illinois is on the road against Bradley, and the Braves of Bradley find themselves as a mid-tier favorite here. You're going to be laying 5.5 to 6.5 with them, 148.5 to 149.5 is the total line. I did set a total of 143. I like the under. You've got a Southern Illinois team in year number 2 under Scott Nagy that is going to be looking to push a little bit more tempo. They have ascended into being more around about 53rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bradley is dialing it back just a little bit. They're currently 133rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. That is a warped stat, though, because you had that crazy game against Indiana State where that went to multiple overtimes. Prior to that game against Indiana State, they were 246th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So you toss out that outlier, and when you go to overtime, you get more possessions in a 45 or 50-minute game rather than a 40-minute game. This is still a relatively slow team, and for Bradley, they've been able to do a superb job in terms of generating turnovers. A top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for the Braves of Bradley, they're doing a great job taking care of the ball. They've been a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, with Jaquan Johnson being the head of the stake, 3.5 assists, 3.5 steals, 18.5 points, shoots 38% from three. Alex Ibaguirre, he shoots 39% from the outside with about 12.5 points per game. Montana Wheeler has been able to give you about 9 points and 3.5 assists as well. This is not quite the same Bradley team from the outside with their three-point shooting as they were a season ago. Lions here, a top 5 team with that regard. They're more around country average this season, but they still do have a 7'1" big man that's able to clog things up, and Met Janovic, who's been able to give you a little bit over 4 boards per contest. So this team has been pretty stout on the inside, and for Southern Illinois, this is a team that's looking to pile drive the ball inside. Top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. Koron House has been the main guy. He's been supplying the team with about 15 points per game. Again, you just don't have a lot of 3-point shooting with this Southern Illinois team. He shoots 26% from 3, and the only guy on the roster that has attempted more than 2 threes per game that is shooting above 30% from 3, that'd be Drew Steffi, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 3 assists. He shoots 34.5% from 3, but for the Southern Illinois bunch, they shoot 28.5% from 3. Bottom 30 team in all of college basketball there. Not doing a bad job on the glass, so they've been a top 100 team in terms of rebound percentage, and they become a top 150 team themselves in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're neither here nor there with their interior defense, about 175th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that with Bradley, they're going to be able to slow this game down a little bit more after their last game got a little bit more harebrained. I know that the possessions per game number looks like Bradley is playing a little bit more quickly, but that said, I also did set my line out of 5. I do think that Bradley is going to be a little bit impacted by the fact that they had to play multiple overtimes against Indiana State. That takes a little bit more out of you. I do think that Southern Illinois going to be able to do just enough on the glass to hold in there, and this is a Southern Illinois team that's really not looking to pop it from 3-point range. I do think that you get a sloppier game with Southern Illinois outside the top 225 in terms of ball security as well, so set a total of a 143. I like the under, and Seth Bradley is a 5-point favorite, so you're at 5.5 plus taking the points with Southern Illinois. 723, 724 on the card. Notre Dame is playing goes to Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne is a underdog of 13.5 to 14.5 points. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total, and for Fort Wayne, I set them as an underdog of 16.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I know that Notre Dame is dealing with the injury to Marcus Burton, but even without Marcus Burton, this team has still been able to do a solid job because they're not allowing any second or third chances. This has been a top 20 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Big reason why has been Carson Tout. Carson Tout only about 6.5 points per game, but he's supplying 10.2 rebounds per game, and Jalen Harrelson has really been able to step up for this team in the interim, with Harrelson done a nice job being able to give you 14 points, 2.5 assists. Not a guy that's going to really shoot it from 3, but he gets other guys like Brandon Shrewsbury. He's right now shooting 50% from 3 on 6.5 threes per game going. He's been able to supply 12 points per game. Cole Kurta has been able to give you a bit more as well, 9 points. He's a real one-trick pony guy who only shoots from 3, but he shoots 42% from the outside, and Notre Dame has become a top 35 team in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. Now, what Notre Dame is not going to do is really going to be putting on you a lot of ball pressure. And Fort Wayne, their specialty is being able to win the turnover battle. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, top 75 in terms of generating turnovers per possession on defense, but this team also gets bludgeoned on the glass, back outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. Now to the credit of Fort Wayne, top 75 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, with Corey Hadnot leading the way, 2.5 steals, 20 points per game, shoots 36.5% from 3. DeAndre 3000 Craig, 42% 3-point shooter, 15.5 points per game, and then Mikhail Stevenson, who comes over from Grambling. He and Craig have been able to combine for 3.3 steals per game. You've got Stevenson give you 14 points. He's not necessarily the greatest 3-point shooter, but the only guy on the roster giving you over 4.4 rebounds per game is Darius Stuffy with about 5.3 rebounds per game. So I do think that Notre Dame is going to do a nice job on the inside, and with Notre Dame, they're a nice 3-point shooting team, and for Fort Wayne, their kryptonite is giving it up from 3-point range. Teams are shooting about 36% from the outside against them. That is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. And for this Purdue Fort Wayne team, they're a team that shoots 42% from 3-point range at home, just 28.2% away from home. So I do think that Notre Dame going to be able to pull away in this one. You do have a Fort Wayne team that they're looking to play somewhat fast. They're not going to be playing at like a ridiculous pace, about 110th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Notre Dame is slow but efficient at 305th. So set a total of 150.5. I like the over-end with Notre Dame. Willing to lay up to 16 with them. 725, 726 on the card. Valparaiso is going to be playing us Murray State. Murray State, a 5.5-point road favorite. 155.5 is the total line. Set Murray State as a 6.5-point favorite. Not willing to really go past the 5.5, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 5.5. You got a Murray State team that's absolutely gunning it with regards to their tempo. They are 46th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Valparaiso more mid-tempo at about 227th in the country, and Valparaiso is a top 110 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not necessarily a team that is going to be flashy on offense. They rank outside the top 275 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage and their 3-point shooting percentage, but they've done a great job corralling their offensive rebounds. They're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. JT Pettigrew has stepped up with 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and Sean Tapula, 7.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, but I do think that they're going to have a tough time with Frederick King, and now they go up against a Murray State team that just really pushes you inside. Murray State, a top 5 team in the country in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range. They don't allow you to have those good 3-point looks, and Murray State as a whole is shooting about 37.8% from 3. Top 50 mark in the country, with Javon Jackson leading the way with 16 points on 41% 3-point shooting. King getting back to him, 8.5 boards, 1.7 blocks, 12.5 points per game, and then Romad Dean throws in there about 5 rebounds per game. Has also been able to do a solid job grabbing second and third chances of their own. They're a top 125 team with this regard. Now, they are going to give up a lot of second and third chances. They've been outside the top 240 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Murray State neither here nor there in terms of generating turnovers, so not going to be under a lot of duress, but I also love the fact that you've got Mason Miller giving you 9 points, shooting 50% from 3-point range. I think that Valparaiso going to have a little bit of a tough time being able to guard the 3-point line. Valparaiso overall has been a top 125 team thus far this season in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and to the credit of Valparaiso, they're a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, so I do think that Valparaiso remains lively, but I just think that the overall shooting is just not there for Valparaiso. Rakeem Chaney is right now your top scorer with 11.5 points, does shoot 43% from 3-point range, but you just need a little bit more out of Isaiah Barnes, who is the starter over at Tulsa, only giving you about 7 points per game on 24% 3-point shooting. And do think that in the end, this is going to be a little bit more of an up and down game that Murray State finds a way to get the job done. And did some I total 154.5. Again, I think that the shooting just is not enough for you to get the over, so like the under and willing to lay up to 6 with Murray State, 727, 728. Cal State Fullerton is on the road against Oklahoma State. Cowboys are a 19.5 to a 20.5 point favorite. 176.5 is the total. And for Oklahoma State, I set them as a favorite of 19 points. So you're at 20 or so. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Well, Fullerton, you've got two teams that are absolutely playing at warp speed. For Fullerton, they have really sped things up from past years. They're up to number 7 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Oklahoma State, they're Mambo number 9 in terms of total possessions per game. And for Oklahoma State, solid offense. I'm not going to call it amazing, but they're a top 130 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Has been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of guarding the 3-point line, but they themselves outside the top 200 with their own 3-point shooting percentage. Fullerton, not really a team that's going to be hurting you from the outside. They're about 262nd in the country in terms of their own 3-point shooting percentage, but big reason why I was willing to take the points here with Fullerton, they're not allowing you to get second and third chances. Now, Fullerton well outside the top 325 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. You're not grabbing any sort of second chances, but Cal State Fullerton is allowing opponents to grab just 23.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is 23rd in all of college basketball, and Oklahoma State is 70th with this regard as well. So while I do think that you get a nice up and down game, I did set my total at 171. I'm going to be in on the the under because you are going to be lacking those second and third chances. Now, for Oklahoma State, you've been able to have Anthony Roy come off of injury, and he has been very rock solid for this team. He's right now supplying 15.5 points. He's shooting 40% from three-point range for a team that overall, shoot about 32% from three outside the top 225 with that regard. Oklahoma State a little bit better on the inside, top 75 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, and for Oklahoma State, they've done a solid job in terms of guarding the arc. Teams are only shooting about 31% from three-point range against them. You've got Jalen Curry supplying 13.5 points, 5.5 assists per game. But Oklahoma State also outside the top 200 in terms of their own ball security. And for Fullerton last year, this team was absolutely atrocious at taking care of the ball. They had no point guard whatsoever. Fullerton doing a much better job of maximizing possessions. They become a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball and a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Their main kryptonite has actually been three-point shooting defense, but you've got Josh Ward along with Bryce Cofield, who have combined for 29.5 points per game. Neither guy really shoots it well from three. Landon Seaman has been able to shoot about 39% from three, and that is his last name, giving you about 14 points per game. And then Jefferson De La Cruz Monegro, he comes over from Valparaiso in Western Michigan. He's been able to supply about 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. You don't really have that one guy for Fullerton other than Ward that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, but they do a nice job by committee of not allowing those second and third chances, the lack of second and third chances, and the way that Fullerton has done a great job on the turnover front has me in on the points with them. I just don't think that you get the second and third chances needed to be able to get the over, so I'm also going to be in on that under. 729, 730 on the card. Charlotte is playing host to Illinois. Chicago, UIC finds themselves as a 2.5 point underdog. 140.5 is the total, and I said Charlotte is a 3.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them. Charlotte is going to be very much looking to slow this game down, while Illinois Chicago, a mid-tempo team. Illinois Chicago about 219th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Charlotte 360th, and with Charlotte, I do think that they have some success slowing it down. I like the under, so I total 139.5. And for Charlotte, they've got the most versatile player out there on the floor, Anton Bonke. He comes over from Providence, 10.5 points, 8.5 boards. He's actually shooting 47% from three-point range. And then Ben Bradford, 13.5 points per game. He's not really giving you anything from three-point range, but to Zane Mingo, the Marshall transfer, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 9 points per game. He's been able to stuff the stat sheet. And for Charlotte, this has become a much better team in terms of being able to give themselves second and third chances. Overall, they're a top 125 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage. Charlotte will give you a few second and third chances, about 120th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and for this Illinois-Chicago team, they are just absolutely giving up second and third chances. In road/neutral court games, teams are grabbing 38.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is the bottom 25 mark in all of college basketball, and that should be very much playing to the strengths of Charlotte, because Charlotte right now 78th in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now for Illinois-Chicago, they are a team that they also grab a lot of second and third chances themselves. They're actually a top 35 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but I don't think that's going to be enough here because Illinois-Chicago also very sloppy with the ball. Outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, Ahmad Henderson has been the head of the snake in the backcourt, 14 points, 3 assists, doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but Andy Johnson, that off-ball guard, shoots 37.5% from the outside, 13.5 points per game, and then Rashad Washington, Mekhi Lowry being a transfer from Towson, combined for about 11.5 rebounds per game, but for Illinois-Chicago, they're also outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and I do think that with Charlotte being able to get that slow and controlled pace, they are able to control the tenor of this game and get it done. I set my total 139.5, like the under, and willing to lay up to 3 with Charlotte. 731, 732 on the card. Arizona State, they play host to Oregon State, and Oregon State finds themselves as a sizable underdog of 12.5 points. 147.5 is the total, and I just set a total of a 147. I'm going to take the under. You got an Arizona State team that's been a top 75 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Arizona State plays fast, but not necessarily like completely harebrained fast. 132nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Oregon State, a rather controlled team. They are about 262nd in terms of total possessions per game, and I did set my line at 13. I am going to be willing to lay it because with Arizona State, they do a good job of generating turnovers, and Oregon State outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, nearly 13 turnovers per game. Now, when Oregon State can get to the free throw line, they're a top 30 team with regards to free throw shooting percentage. You've got Des White, who's been a nice stat sheet sufferer, pair of assists, 11 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and then Josiah Lake, 13 points, 5.3 rebounds per game. Problem with this team is that Lake is right now leading the team in rebounds. You bring in someone like a 7-footer, Noah Ammenhauser, only about 3.2 rebounds per game, or Diaz Graham has been a big giant flopperoonie, and an Arizona State team that typically has a little bit of issue down low actually has a little bit of an advantage in this game, given how bad Oregon State is at being able to provide second and third chances. Both of these teams outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but on the side of Arizona State is the best player in this game. Mo Odom, 16 points, 6.3 assists, 3.2 turnovers per game, shoots 9 30s from 3, and Arizona State all of a sudden shooting 37% from 3, top 75 mark in all of college basketball, pretty much country average with their 2-point shooting percentage, but Masamba Diop is giving you quite a bit down low, block and a half, 5.5 rebounds, 13 points per game. Santiago Triad is out giving you about 6 rebounds per game as well with Arizona State. They've been neither here nor there with regards to their 3-point shooting defense, but I do think that they force Oregon State into some turnovers and get the job done. I did semi-total at a 147, so at a 147.5, I like the under, and we'll lay up to 12.5 with Arizona State. 733, 734 on the card. It is Cincinnati, and they're going to be playing against Clemson. Neutral court game, but going to be a bit more of a Clemson crowd here, as they are a 6.5 point favorite. 137.5 is the total. I do like the over here. I semi-total 141.5. It's mainly because you're just going to get so many possessions in this game. Cincinnati, for some reason, is a top 60 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Man, that just big giant flopperoonie against Eastern Michigan. But that said, this is also a team that has been able to do actually a pretty solid job with their defense. They're a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Clemson is a balanced team. Clemson 40th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 43rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Going to have their hands full most likely with Boba Miller, 14.5 points, 11 boards, block and a half per contest, and then Day Thomas. He actually has shot it well from 3 for the Cincinnati team, shoots 46% from 3, 13 points per game, and now you finally have Jizzle James back. They reinstated him. He had 16 points in that first game, and it should elevate the Cincinnati backcourt a little bit more. I do think that they're going to be a little bit more efficient than what they have been. They've been outside the top 225. Cincinnati has been in both points per possession and also turnovers on a per possession basis with regards to their offense. James should be able to help out with that a little bit, but still, Clemson, a top 20 team in terms of taking care of the ball, only 9 turnovers per game, despite the fact that you really don't have that main facilitator. Right now, Dylan Hunter leads away with 2.7 assists, 9.5 points per game, but I mean, it's really mix and match, and for this Clemson team, they've also done a good job in terms of winning the rebound battle. Top 50 team in terms of rebound percentage, despite only having one guy with over 5.6 rebounds per game. That'd be RJ Godfrey, 11.4 points, 6.2 rebounds per game, and Godfrey leads the way in scoring, but you've got right now 9 different guys between 5.8 and 11.4 points per game. Very much a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of collective. They've been really cutting teams off from 3 as well. Teams are shooting just 26.5% from 3 against them. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. A little bit more vulnerable on the inside, and Clemson's not really going to force the issue. They are outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so I do think that those clean possessions help you out with the over, but with Clemson, I do think that they get the job done against the Cincinnati team that just has not been efficient this year. I like the over semi-total 141.5, and I'm going to lay it with Clemson. 735, 736 on the card. It is Michigan playing against LaSalle. LaSalle is exploring a cover as a 38.5 to a 39.5 point dog. 151.5 is the total, and I actually set my line at Michigan being a 38.5 point favorite. This opened up at a 34.5. This has just gone a little bit too far here. At 39 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points. We talked about it with our good friend Shaggy Betts in that this LaSalle team is outgunned. Like, let's call it what it is. It's a LaSalle team that's outgunned, but they do play slow. They're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. This is a LaSalle team that's been a top 80 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They're going to lose a battle to Michigan. Like, Michigan has been a top 10 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage. You've got Yaxel Lenderborg give you 15 plus points, 7 plus rebounds per game. Ade Mara has been able to give you 8 plus rebounds per game. So, I mean, yeah, that's not necessarily going to be impressive, but still, with this LaSalle team, they are finding a way to give themselves second and third chances. In road/neutral court games, they get about 35.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Only one double-figure scorer on the roster for LaSalle, Jaden Marshall, 12.5 points per game. But I mean, you've got a lot of mixing and matching down low with a quartet of different guys between 4.4 and 5.7 rebounds per game. And Edwin Daniel, Rob Dockery, Josiah Harris, and Justin Archer. And then Ashon Walker has been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3, supply about 9 points, 3.5 assists per game. It's a LaSalle team that has had a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And if Michigan does have one weakness, they do still have a few more turnovers than what you'd like to see. They have been outside the top 175 in terms of ball security. But as we know, this is a Michigan team that they're going to be looking to push tempo. Maybe not warp speed tempo, but still 16th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But I mean, you just have, in my opinion, a guy in Elliot Kadu who's been able to elevate this backcourt. Only about 9.5 points per game, but 6 assists to 2.4 turnovers per game. He shoots over 40% from 3. Lenderborg getting back to him. He shoots 40+% from 3-pointers. Roddy Gale has been able to give about 11 points per game. You just have so many guys that are contributing to this bunch, as right now you've got 8 different guys for Michigan give you at least 7.8 points per game. They're still one of the top defenses in all of college basketball as well, and I do think that Michigan, they get the job done here. It's going to be convincing, but I think we're just getting up a little bit too high in what I think is a game that LaSalle slows down just a scotch. So my total at a 146.5, I I like the under, and I'm willing to take 39 plus here with LaSalle. 737, 738 was Brown versus USC. USC and Brown just mutually decided to cancel the game. USC is going to play a Division III team. Games against non-Division I teams unfortunately don't make the betting board, so we move on. 739, 740 on the card. Evansville is playing host to Drake, and the Drake is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point road favorite. 144.5 is the total, and I set the Drake as a 7-point favorite, so I am going to be willing to lay the number with this Drake bunch. They do a nice job slowing games down. They're about 290th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Drake, they've been a really good team on the road in terms of their defense. 81st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. Top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Big going against an Evansville team that is both 311th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis and 3-point shooting percentage, while Drake, they're shooting a relatively solid from 3, 37% from the outside, top 75 mark in the country with Jalen Quinn, give you about 18 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists as the main scorer. You've had Jashawn Thomas shoot 40% from the outside. He's supplying 11 points per game. Drake doing a great job taking care of the ball. Top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, while you do have an Evansville team that has been a little bit careless with the ball, so that helps them out a little bit. Evansville outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, and it's not an Evansville team that's necessarily going to be pushing tempo as well. About 232nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Evansville not the world's worst team on the glass. Your main two scorers and Connor Turnbull, Joshua Hughes combined for 11 rebounds per game. Hughes about 10 points per game. He does shoot over 44% from 3, and Turnbull shoots in the mid-30s from 3. He gives you 3 blocks per game, so that has been solid for an Evansville team that is a top 125 team in terms of block shot rate, but still, even with that, they are very vulnerable from the outside, and this is a Drake team that's looking to go bounce away from 3. They're allowing teams to shoot 37.5% from the outside. This is a Drake unit that is in the top 125 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, and I do think that this is going to be a clean game with regards to possessions, but I think that it's going to be a very slow game, and I think that Drake is going to be able to control the tenor of it with their 2-point shooting defense, so I did set my total here at a 139. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 with Drake. 741, 742 on the card. It is Sam Houston State, and Sam I am Houston State is on the road against New Mexico State. New Mexico State, a 1.5 to a 2.5 point favorite. 154.5 to a 157 is the total, and I set my total here at a 145.5. I like the under. I feel like this is a little bit correlated. If you like the over, you probably like Sam Houston State. If you like the under, you most likely like New Mexico State, as Sam Houston State, they're looking to push quite a bit of tempo. 52nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and New Mexico State, well, this team is about 306th, but New Mexico State, once again, very rock solid with their defense. Top 95 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and to the credit of Sam Houston State, they're doing a nice job of not allowing open looks from 3. Top 36 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. It has been a New Mexico State team that's been a little bit wobbly with their offense. They've cleaned up some of the turnovers from the season going. New Mexico State now a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and New Mexico State really does dare you to shoot from 3, as this team has been a top 75 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 3-point range, and for New Mexico State, they've got a headline scorer that comes over from the Meep Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners in Jamel Jones, who's been very solid. 16 points, 5 boards, doesn't actually shoot it well from 3, and that's ever been the game of New Mexico State. They shoot 31.5% from the outside as collective, but Elijah Elliott and Anthony Warches, hopefully I got that correct, that name has no vowels in there whatsoever, but that said, they've been able to combine for about 15 points per game. They're combining shoot about 36 or so percent from 3-point range, and then for Sam Houston, it's been very much a collective effort. With losing Lamar Wilkerson a season ago, they didn't necessarily replace him with one guy. You actually have now 7 different guys that give you between 8.6 and 12.2 points per game, with Kashai not being the main scorer, shooting 47% from 3, 12 points per game. And Sam Houston State now about a country average team in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage at 34.5%, but where this team is really making their hay is on the glass, and really both of these teams have been very rock solid with regards to rebounding. For Sam Houston State, they are 41st in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. You had a New Mexico State team that's 46th with this regard, and for New Mexico State, they've been a top 75 team in terms of the defensive rebound percentage, while Sam Houston State giving up many more second and third chances. It is a Sam Houston State team that's outside the top 140 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and I do think that that's going to hurt them just a little bit here, even though you've got some like a Po Boy King, who's been solid in the backcourt with 11.5 points per game coming over from NC State. Justin Begg has been able to give you 9 points per contest, and once again, just like with the scoring, it's a nice collective with the Sam Houston State team with 5 different guys give you at least 3.7 rebounds per game. Not is the only guy that gives you over 6 rebounds per game, but I do think in the end, New Mexico State, their overall defense just wins out in the spot. Semi total out of 145.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up the 5 with New Mexico State. 7:43, 7:44 on the card. It is DePaul, and they play us to UConn. UConn finds themselves as a very sizable favorite here, as you're going to be laying with them between 14.5 to 15 points. 136.5 is the total, and I set my line at 14.5. 15 plus does become my buy point on DePaul. We'll see where this goes overnight, because if we get down to like a 13.5, I would be willing to lay with UConn, but if I had to play this number right now at the 15, I would be willing to take a shot on DePaul. You got a UConn team that's been very rock solid with their defense. They're back in the top 25 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This unit has been a little bit down with regards to rebounding to begin the season, but a lot of that was because Terrace Reed missed 5 games. He's back. He's giving you 14.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, so that is going to be recovering. UConn outside the top 45 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but now you're getting solo ball back to being able to shoot the way they did a season ago. Had a little bit of a rough go of it to begin the season, but outshot from three-point range over 37.5% in 4 of the last 5 games. Had that 26-point expose against Butler, right now supplying about 15.5 points per game, and you know that UConn is going to be very efficient with the ball. UConn, a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and UConn also a top 15 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, while they go up against a DePaul team that has actually been solid with their defense. DePaul is a top 55 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 100 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I actually do think that you're going to get a slog of a game. I set my total at 134.5. I'm going to be in on the under. DePaul also not necessarily playing at a super fast pace. They're only about 179th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UConn is down to about 293rd with this regard. And for this DePaul bunch, you've had NJ Benson do a solid job down low, 6.5 boards, 11.5 points per game. He is the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. I do think that it's going to be a little bit rough for them on the glass. This DePaul team is right now outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They've been outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, doing an okay job down low. CJ Gunn is giving you 14-point shooting, 34% from 3, and they're getting more three-point shooting out of Caleb Banks, a transfer from Tulane and Indiana. He's been able to supply the team with a combined 41 points over the last 3 games, overall shooting 44% from 3, but in the end, I do think that you get a sloppy, gross game with a lot of turnovers, a lot of defense, and in the end, I do think that UConn pulls it out, but I think once you get to a 15, it's gone to a point of no return. At 15 plus, we'll take the points with the ball in on the under. I set my total at a 134.5. 7:45, 7:46 on the card. Cleveland State plays us at UW Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a 7.5 point road favorite. Total on this game is 161.5, and for UW Milwaukee, you can only set them as 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one take the points. Now, Cleveland State has been a disaster class with regards to both generating turnovers and just being able to, in general, flow good, clean offense, or a team that only ranks about 257th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, while UW Milwaukee is in the top 100 with this regard. But for this UW Milwaukee team, this is not a unit that is necessarily going to be forcing the issue in terms of generating turnovers, and they give up a lot of clean looks outside the top 275 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 340 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage of opponents. So that's why I'm willing to take the points with Cleveland State. Now, with Cleveland State, this is looking to be a team that's going to be playing more up-tempo, while Milwaukee is a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, with Milwaukee about 148th in terms of total possessions per game. Cleveland State is more around about 57th, and Milwaukee has had Seth Hubbard do a nice job in the backcourt, 16.5 points. He shoots about 36% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, you got Amar Uyagard, a very highly touted junior college guy that was over at Fresno State last year. He's supplying about 11 points per game, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but Milwaukee, a pedestrian 32.5% 3-point shooting team. They're outside the top 225 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now, what they do well, Milwaukee does, top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. A lot of that is thanks to the fact that you don't necessarily have that one main point guard, but all these guys do a nice job in terms of keeping things clean, with Isaiah Ducaris, who's been able to give you about 4 assists, only about 2 turnovers per game. But other than Daniil Janovic, the rebounding has taken a little bit of a setback from a season ago. Now, for Cleveland State, they've been dealing with a few injuries recently, as well as one of their main scorers in Josiah Harris has been in and out of the lineup. They've got him most likely out for this game. He's been able to give you about 10 points per game, and he only shot about 30% from 3-point range, but they were without Trey Beard for a little bit of time, and looks like he should be good to go. He's been able to give the team 8+ points in each of the last 5 games, and he's currently shooting 50% from 3 with 14 points per contest, so having him back is huge. I know that they were dealing with a little bit of injury as well to Kamari Jones, who comes in off the bench, shoots in the 30s from 3. He should be good to go as well. And then Ice Emery, who's been coming off the bench, being able to give this team a bit of a spark in the backcourt, 10 points, pair of assists per contest. He's now shooting 40% from 3 for a Cleveland State team that has been a top 75 unit with their 3-point shooting percentage at 38%. they get bludgeoned inside, outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. For Cleveland State, they're outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and those turnovers, they have been very costly, outside the top 320 in terms of overall ball security, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be in on the under. I said my total at 160.5, but I do think that 3-point shooting does just enough for this Cleveland State team to remain lively, so I'm in on the under, and at anything above 5, I'm going to take those points with Cleveland State. 747, 748 on the card. It is Columbia on the road against Cal, and California is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. 148.5 to a 149.5 is the total. I said Cal is an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got a Columbia team that has one main weakness, and that is turnovers, because this Columbia team has actually been really good on the glass. Columbia is a top 25 team right now nationally in terms of their overall rebound percentage. They have been absolutely lighting it up from 3-point range as well. Columbia 15th in the country in 3-point shooting percentage at 39.5%. Cal is not quite that, but this is a California team that has been shooting well from 3 as well. If you look at them, they're shooting just 37.5% from 3. Overall, they're actually above Columbia, by the way, now. They're up to 40.2% from the outside because they're shooting 52% from 3-point range away from home. I do think that you're going to see a little bit of a decline with these 3-point shooting percentages for both teams, and you do have a Columbia team that's actually looking to play very slow and controlled, while Cal is more of a mid-tempo team. Cal is about 166th in terms of total possessions per game. Columbia down to about 209th as they brought in Kevin Hovde. He was an assistant over at Florida and the Gators with their national title run. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of elevating that. But again, I do think that the turnovers are going to be a little bit costly for Columbia. They're currently 307th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Cal, they do a much better job taking care of the ball at 72nd. Now for Columbia, they actually brought back a lot of pieces from a season ago despite the coaching change, as you've been able to get great production out of Kenny Nolan with about 17.5 points, 3.5 assists. He shoots 40+% from 3, and as a matter of fact, for this Columbia team, each of your top 4 scorers shoot over 40% from 3-point range. Zanu Adi Bedri is like 6'9". He's been dealing with an injury and probably going to be out once again, but in his place, you've been able to get really good production out of Blair Thomason, who's been at about 6'8", shooting 46% from 3, 10 points, 5 rebounds per game. They've been looking a little bit more to Mason Ritter and Ryan Solis to be able to control the glass, and they've done a great job. Solis about 5.5 boards, block and half per contest with 7 points per game. Ritter about 5.3 rebounds, 6.5 points per game as well, and I do think that for Cal, the big thing for them is getting Lidor to be able to step up in this game. He's been their top rebounder within that neighborhood, about 7 rebounds at a bit over a block per contest. But with this Cal team, they've been top to bottom just very rock solid with their defense. They're a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that the overall 3-point shooting is going to do just enough for you to be able to get the over. I did set my total at a 149.5. So here at a 148.5, like I'm seeing in quite a few places, in on the over, and with Cal made them the 11.5 point favorite, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. 749, 750 on the card. Indiana State is going to be on the road against Illinois State. Illinois State, a favorite here of double figures, 11.5 to 12 points. So this game between 147.5 to 150.5. So quite a wide range of numbers with regards to this total. And I'm going to be in on the over. I did set my total at a 153.5. Now you do have an Indiana State team that's playing quite a bit more slowly than a season ago, but they've cranked up their tempo quite a bit more here in the recent few games. That is mainly because of the multiple overtime game that we saw a few days ago, about 70th in the country now in terms of total possessions per game after that Bradley game. Prior to that Bradley game, closer to about 140th, 150th, and Illinois State, a mid-tempo team, they're about 217th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Illinois State has actually really improved on defense. Last year, they were pretty gross with that regard. They're up to 69th, very nice in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Indiana State, they've been actually relatively solid with their defense as well, at about 81st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Here's the issue with them, though. They are giving up over 18.5 points more per 100 possessions at a road/neutral venue rather than at home, and for Indiana State, what has really been their undoing has been turnovers. Outside the top 240 in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, they face off against an Illinois State team that doesn't necessarily generate a ton of turnovers. They're outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, so I was willing to take the points with Indiana State, set them as an 11.5 point underdog, and for Indiana State, it's a nice little bit of a collective team with two main scorers, Camp Wagner and Ian Scott, both give you between 13 to 13.5 points per game. Scott is actually shooting 50% from 3-point range, and these two guys have been able to come in for about 13 rebounds per game for Indiana State. That team is going to give you any sort of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of their missed shots are resulting in an offensive rebound, and after being a top 75 unit with their 3-point shooting percentage last year, outside the top 280 this season, but they've been also a top 85 team in terms of their 3-point 3-point shooting percentage defense after they were awful in that last year. So I actually do think that you're going to see a little bit of positive progression with their 3-point shooting offense and negative regression with their 3-point shooting defense. Meanwhile, you've got an Illinois State team that struggled a little bit from the outside to begin the season, but are now really picking it up and so very efficient with the ball. Top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're in the top 125 with their 3-point shooting percentage, with Johnny Kinzinger shooting 35% from 3, 12.5 points per game to lead the way. But you've got 5 different guys with between 10.7 and 12.4 points per game. Ty Pence, Bowden Scumberg, Terry Coleman, and Chase Walker, with Walker supplying about 5.5 rebounds per game. And Illinois State, much like 8 seasons ago, doing a relatively solid job on the defensive glass. They're not really going to generate a whole bunch of second and third chances themselves. They're outside the top 175 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but in terms of being able to keep you from being able to get those second and third chances as well, it's an Illinois State unit that has been in the top 60 in all of college basketball, and at home, they're only allowing opponents to grab 20% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. This too is a team that's in the top 100 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but again, I think that that's going to go downward a little bit, and for Landon Wolf, he's taken a little bit of a setback from a season ago, but still giving you about 5 points, 5 rebounds per game. I do think that what is going to be a relatively mid-tempo team is going to see both of these teams take away a few threes, be able to knock down quite a few threes, and I think that Indiana State does just enough to hold in this game with Illinois State not necessarily generating a ton of turnovers. So set a total here of a 153.5. I like the over, and at 12 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Indiana State. 751, 752 on the card. Campbell is on the road against Minnesota. Minnesota, the state with the smallest strengths in the union, a 13.5 to a 14.5 point favorite. 143.5 to a 144.5 is the total, and I did set a total of a 141. I like the under. You've got a Minnesota team that is playing quite slowly. They're outside the top 260 in terms of total possessions per game. Campbell, in their first year under John Andrewchuk, who comes over from Florida, he's actually got this team playing quite quickly. Top 60 team in terms of total possessions per game. Problem is the sloppiness. Campbell outside the top 310 in terms of ball security. 15 turnovers per game, and they're only shooting 29.5% from 3 outside the top 300 with that regard. We've got a Minnesota team that they themselves are not necessarily shooting it amazingly from 3-point range, so I did set a line of 13. I'm still going to be willing to take the points with Campbell because they're doing an exceptional job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and they're not really doing a bad job on the defensive glass either. They are allowing teams to grab about 31% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, so they still need to rein it in there, and this has been a Minnesota team that has been really good with their defensive rebounding. 22nd in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing about 23% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, they're okay at grabbing second chances, 112th in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and Campbell, they're a top 150 team with this regard as well. But for Campbell, you've got a pair of guys that'll be able to combine for about 17 rebounds per game in Davideus Butka, along with Chris Fields. DJ Turner-Smith has been that main scorer with 19 points per game. Smith shoots about 35% from 3-point range, is the only of their top 5 scorers, shooting above 30% from 3-point range. But Cam Gregory, who's been in the system for quite a while, he gives you 3 assists per game, so he's been able to do a nice job on that front. And this has been a Campbell team that has been a top 175 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis. With Minnesota, they've been able to get quite a bit down low out of Jalen Crocker Johnson. He's a stat sheet sufferer with about 13 points, 8 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, and Cade Tyson has been their main scorer, shooting 40% from 3, 22.5 points per game. Minnesota got off to a rough start to the season with their 3-point shooting. They're starting to pick it up a little bit here, but for this Minnesota team, they are also allowing teams to shoot 36% from the outside. Again, you've got a Campbell team that's not necessarily shooting it amazingly from 3-point range, so I do think that that's a little bit less to fret about. And this is a Campbell team that is not really looking to let it fly too much from 3-point range. They're outside the top 225 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. I do think that the overall sloppiness is going to just cost you an over in this spot, but I do think that Campbell is going to be able to hold in there on the glass. You've got a Minnesota team that has been able to do an okay job in terms of taking care of the ball, about country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, with Isaac Usama being the main facilitator, 9.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. And Langston Reynolds, he throws in there about 10 points, 4.5 assists per game, comes over from Northern Colorado, but in the end, I think that Campbell does just enough to hold within this number. Set my line at 13, so we'll take the points with Campbell, and I'm going to be in on the under. 753, 754 on the card. Neutral court game from Portland, Oregon. The Ducks of Oregon play against Gonzaga. Gonzaga finds themselves as a favorite of 12.5 points. Toss game between 158.5 to a 159.5. Willing to lay with Gonzaga. I set them as a 13.5 point favorite. Gonzaga, number 4 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're still playing their nice fast pace. They're 31st 21st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Oregon, much more of a mid-tempo team. Oregon right now 205th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Oregon, it's just been a relatively rough go of it for them on offense outside the top 110 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do one thing really well, though. They grab offensive rebounds. 37.5% of their missed shots do become an offensive rebound. That is 17th in all of college basketball, but not sure you're going to get too many second and third chances against a Gonzaga team that's been in the top 50 with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. You've got Graham Ike absolutely eating down low, 17 points, 8 rebounds per game. Ty and Grant Foster, an absolute statue, suffer along Braden Huff. Both of these guys give between about 5 to 5.5 rebounds per game. Grant Foster, 11 points per game. He's not going to light you up from three. And for Gonzaga, they're still a solid three-point shooting team, but they're not quite as high on the three-point shooting rankings as they've been in the past, shooting about 36% from the outside, but still doling out good, clean offense. Top 60 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis. Still a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, but eyeing that defense. The line teams who shoot only about 27.5% from three-point range. That has been masterful, and for Oregon, being outside the top 265 in terms of ball security, I think is a big issue for them. Evo Jackson Shell said back, and he's been great. He's been able to give the team 16 points. He shoots about 32.5% from three, 5 assists fewer than 2 turnovers per game. This team is still sloppy with it. You've got KJ Evans along TK Simpkins combining for about 26 points per game, and Simpkins has actually shot 41% from three at Elon last year. He was actually not a great three-point shooter, but still have issues there. And then Nate Biddle, he's a versatile big man at 7 feet tall, pair of blocks, 6 rebounds, 13.5 points per game. Do like his overall game, but for Gonzaga, I do feel like the overall depth of this team, someone like a Jalen Worley, who just does a little bit of this and that, 6.5 points, he'll throw in there like 5 boards, a steal per game, the man of steel, Seal Venters, being able to really bomb it from three, and Mario St. Sapri, who comes over from Spain, 4.5 assists, 9 points per game. This is just a collective that I think finds a way to be able to get the job done against an Oregon team that's been inefficient on offense. So made it to 153.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay with Gonzaga. 755, 756 on the card. Long Beach State is on the road against Iowa State. Iowa State does find themselves as a very sizable favorite here. You're going to be laying 36.5 to 37.5 points. 149.5 to a 151 is the total. And for Iowa State, I set them as a 36.5-point favorite. So once you get up to 37, I'm going to be willing to take the points. I love Hilton Magic, but with a lot of kids off campus, I don't know if you get quite the same vibe for a Long Beach State team. This team is still going to be up for this. So I mean, TJ Altenberger, one of the better coaches in all of college basketball, and he's got a pair of 17.5 point per game scores in Joshua Jefferson and Milan Mimosilovic, who have been very amazing. Jefferson, I mean, one of the most underrated players in all of college basketball. 7.5, 5 assists, 6.5 rebounds, shoots 43% from three at 6'8". Mimosilovic shoots 52% from three-point range. And for Iowa State, I mean, you can talk about the offense all you want. They're a top 3 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but back in the top 10 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, as per usual. One of the best defenses that you're going to find in all of college basketball, number 5 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they very much should take it to a Long Beach State team that has not been the world's greatest team in terms of taking care of the ball, to say the least. For Long Beach State in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, about 175th in all of college basketball. On the road, that goes well outside the top 225. They've been much better when they've been playing at home, but for Long Beach State, they're doing a little bit of a better job on the glass than a season ago. That despite the fact that you've had Derek Michael Ziviero, really your top rebounder from a season ago, do a big giant nothing burger for this team. But Long Beach State is not allowing teams to be able to get any sort of second and third chances whatsoever. Teams are only grabbing about 7.5 offensive rebounds per game. They've been a top 115 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, so that's a step in the right direction. Gavin Sykes and Peter Mestrovich have been your main guys. They've been able to combine for about 32 points per game, and with Sykes, he shoots 38% from three-point range, and when you've got Shaquille Bender out there, he's been able to give you a little bit in the backcourt as well, shooting in the mid-30s from three, 9.5 points per game. Long Beach State, a country average team with their three-point shooting percentage, and Long Beach State, to their credit, they've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been one of the more unlucky teams in all of college basketball. Teams shoot 78% of the free throw line against them. As we know, you can't guard the free throw line, and that is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball, but they're also allowing teams to shoot about 37% from three-point range, and this has been an Iowa State team that has cranked up their tempo, while you've got a Long Beach State team that's very mid-tempo. For Long Beach State, about 193rd in terms of total possessions per game. Iowa State, right now, they are checking in 135th. I do think that the Iowa State defense is just enough to be able to keep you under semi-total 148.5, so like the under, and at 37 plus, won't take the points with Long Beach State. 757, 758 on the card. UC Davis is on the road against Idaho State. Idaho State is a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 138.5 to 139.5, and with Idaho State. I did set them as a favorite of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Idaho State currently 335th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They go up against a relatively mid-tempo UC Davis team, and for UC Davis, their games just involve a ton of turnovers. 300th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis on offense, 72nd in terms of turnovers generated on a per-possession basis on defense. At Idaho State, they've had a very tough time taking care of the ball. 306th in terms of turnovers per possession on offense, but they are doing a great job on the offensive glass. They grabbed 36.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound at home, top 16 mark in the country. And Idaho State is actually second in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. Overall, it's 142nd. I do think that you're going to see that tick downward, but that's it. For Idaho State, you've been able to get quite a bit out of Colin Hellenbuck along Caleb Van Green, pair of 6'7", 6'8" combo players that are right now combining for about 28 points per game. Van de Green has been able to shoot 36% from three to go along 7 boards per contest. Hellenbuck, he's been shooting 40% from three, and Jamison Guerra has been able to give you 8.5 points, 4.5 assists, so only about 1.6 turnovers per game, while shooting in the high 30s from three-point range himself. And for UC Davis, typically this is a team that they have like one main guy that's giving you 20-plus points per game. It's really been a collective of two guys in Niles Cooper along Connor Sevilla. These two guys are combining for about 20 points per game, and both are shooting over 40% from three-point range, but you just don't necessarily have a ton down low. You got Nico Rokac, who's been able to do a nice job, give you about 5.5 boards, 7 points per game, but he's the lone guy on the roster that really gives you above 4.6 rebounds per game, and this is a UC Davis team that is outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they are doing nothing whatsoever to give themselves second chances. 346th in the country in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. You got a UC Davis team that is relatively mid-tempo, 146th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that you're going to get a ton of dead possessions in this game, with this being a UC Davis team that's also outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I think that Idaho State gets the job done, and Idaho State gets it done at their slow and controlled tempo. Semi-line at 7.5. I'm willing to lay with Idaho State, and I'm going to be in on the under as well. Semi-total 133.5. 759, 760 on the card. Cal Poly is going to be playing against Idaho, and Idaho is looking to hopefully not vandalize your bankroll if you bet on them as 2.5 point favorites. 167 to 167.5 is the total line. I do think that bankrolls might be vandalized because I said Cal Poly is a 4-point favorite. I like Cal Poly on the money line. It is an Idaho team that is not going to be able to take advantage of the main kryptonite that you got for this Cal Poly team. Cal Poly has been absolutely awful at taking care of the ball. 357th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. That goes down to about 211th at home, and you've got an Idaho team that's 336th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're 272nd on defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They go up against Cal Poly team that's looking to absolutely gun it. Right now, Cal Poly is 8th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got a very mid-tempo team on the flip side in Idaho. Idaho has been speeding themselves a little bit more from past years, still about 275th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Idaho, to their credit, they become a top 110 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This despite the fact that your main guy, Christian Gonzalez, who's back from the season ago, has only played in one game this season, but you've had Colton Mitchell, Biko Johnson do a nice job as a tandem with about 21.5 points per game. These two guys shoot in the mid-30s from three, and they dole out 6.8 assists at fewer than 3.5 turnovers per game, while Jackson Rasmussen has been very versatile, shooting 37.5% from three as a wing, 15.5 points, 4.2 rebounds per game, and Idaho as a whole, they've been a top 50 team with their three-point shooting percentage at above 38%. They're pretty good with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, and the one thing that Idaho has been able to do on defense is they don't really allow a lot of second and third chances. This is an Idaho team that's been a top 125 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. As a matter of fact, they're 24th in the country with this regard, and this has been a Cal Poly team that's been pretty solid in terms of their rebound percentage as well. They're allowing teams to only grab about 26% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, but while Idaho does a great job not allowing second and third chances, they don't generate for themselves a ton of second and third chances. With Idaho, you have Brody Woodbury, who comes over from Southeast Louisiana, giving you 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and Jack Payne has been a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy, 7.5 points, 5 rebounds. He's able to pop it from three, but doesn't necessarily pop it well from three. And Isaiah Brickner, he's up to 64% three-point shooting. I don't know why they keep having him come off the bench. He should be in the starting lineup, but I do think that Cal Poly's overall versatility going to be able to win out in this spot, as Cal Poly has also done a solid job in terms of grabbing for themselves some second and third chances, with having Haban Musa be able to supply 19.5 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots over 40% from three, and Peter Benjai has been able to supply about 4.5 boards, 4 assists, 17 points per game. Shoots 49% from 3, with the turnovers being less of an issue against this Idaho defense. I do think that this team is going to be able to get some good, clean looks and find a way to get the job done. Did my total 164. Idaho, a little bit of a lower tempo team, so in on the under and Cal Poly on the money line. 761, 762 on the card. Nebraska plays host to North Dakota. North Dakota finds themselves as a sizable underdog of 29.5 to 30.5 points. Your total is 148.5 to 149.5. Semi-total 146.5. I do like the under. You have a Nebraska team that is not looking to play like super duper fast or super duper slow, 151st in terms of total possessions per game. North Dakota has slowed down themselves just a scotch from a season ago, about 119th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And North Dakota last year was absolutely awful on defense. Now they're just awful on defense, 280th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And to the credit of North Dakota, they become a top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they are a team that they sort of gamble for turnovers, and if they don't get a turnover, they get just line based outside the top 35 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and they just don't necessarily have a lot of scoring pop. North Dakota is right now well outside the top 235 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Eli King and Grayson Ullman have been able to combine for about 24.5 points per game, a combined 4 steals out of the two of them, and Ullman has been able to shoot 35.5% from 3, but this team is hovering right around about 300th with their 3-point shooting percentage at 30.5%. They do an okay job taking care of the ball, a top 150 team in terms of ball security, but really not a ton down low either, as right now you've only got one guy on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, George Nachavili, and for Nebraska, Rink Bass should be able to really take over this game with about 18 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists. He's shooting 42.5% from 3, and Nebraska, they shoot 36% from 3, and Nebraska has really been able to excel on the defensive side of things, especially when they've been at home. This Nebraska team, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, checking in 36th in all of college basketball. If you look specifically at their home games, that actually elevates into the top 20, and for Nebraska, you've been able to have Price Sanford give good versatility, 17 points on 39.5% 3-point shooting, while supplying 5 rebounds per game. It is a Nebraska team that has been very good in terms of taking care of the ball as well. Top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed per possession as well. They sort of dare you to shoot from 3. Opponents are taking more 3-point shots than 2-point shots, and with the way that North Dakota just does not shoot it well from 3, I think that you get an under in this spot, so my total 146.5. As that Nebraska is a 30.5 point favorite, so at 30 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it. This is a neutral court game from El Paso, 763, 764 on the card. You got UC Irvine's outside for the Anteaters playing against North Dakota State. North Dakota State is a 1.5 point underdog, 142.5 to 143 is the total, and I made a total of a 138.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Now for UC Irvine, this offense has actually been terrible. They are right now about 321st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. That said, this Irvine defense continues to be rock solid. 27th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a road/neutral court venue. That is numero dos in all of college basketball, and that's why I said Irvine as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Again, with this Irvine team, they've taken just such big strides back with regards to that offense because they're actually having a little bit of a tough time on glass. They're outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're not grabbing a lot of second and third chances for themselves, but that said, with this Irvine team, they're just so good with their interior defense. Top 5 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Kyle Evans, who was sort of lost in the shadow of Ben Lyken and the other big men a season ago, 10 points, 3 blocks, 8 rebounds per game. Darren Sarr and Jurion Dixon in the backcourt combined for about 28.5 points per game. You've got Dixon shooting 39.5% from 3, really the lone out of their top 4 scorers that shoots above 33.5% from 3, though Jovan Jester, who's a little bit more of an ancillary guy, he's been able to shoot about 38% from 3-point range off the bench, 7.5 points per game with Irvine. They're a country average team in terms of generating turnovers, and for North Dakota State, this has been a complete transformation for them. They were last year a really good 3-point shooting team. As a matter of fact, number 1 in all of college basketball. They're now outside the top 240, and they've went from being 5th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis all the way down to 153rd, but a defense last year that was just absolutely ghastly. They're now about 88th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they've actually become 91st in the country in terms of total possessions per game after playing very slow and controlled last season. Irvine, a top 150 team in terms of total possessions per game as well, and the big forte for this North Dakota State team has actually been generating turnovers. 41st in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis after they were like a bottom 10 team with this regard a season ago. For North Dakota State, they had a lot of their backcourt just leave from a season ago, but they do bring back Damari Wheeler-Thomas, who missed all of last season due to injury, 15 points, 3.5 assists. He's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3, and Travion Carson, along with Anthony Stefanovic, these two guys are combined for about 21.5 points per game. Stefanovic, 4.8 assists, about 2 turnovers per game. He shoots 40% from 3, but the ancillary guys have haven't been able to give you quite as much. This has been a North Dakota State team that has been a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage as well. They don't necessarily grab a ton of second and third chances for themselves, but they're not going to allow you to grab a lot of second and third chances. I do think that this is going to be a defense-oriented game, but with the way that Irvine does such a great job of guarding down low, the way that North Dakota State is out bombing it from three, I like UC Irvine in the spot, willing to lay it with them, and I'm in on the under. Semi total 138.5. This is the last game on the normalized betting board before we hit the extra games. 765, 766. Norfolk State is on the road against UTEP. This is for the Don Haskins Center, so a true home game for UTEP as a 7.5 point favorite. 131.5 is the total, and I say UTEP is just a 6 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You got a pair of offenses that are just not getting anything going whatsoever. And a UTEP defense that, as per usual, they're doing a great job generating turnovers. 42nd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis if you look only at their home games against D1 teams. So that takes out the D3 game where they went to double overtime. They're actually number one in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in just strictly their home games. But again, a UTEP team that they don't have the 3-point shooting that they had a season ago. 350th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Norfolk State is 333rd, and neither of these teams are really pushing tempo right now. With this Norfolk State team, they're about 216th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UTEP is 327th. I set a low total here of a 128. I think that you get a slug, and I'm going to be in on the under. And for UTEP, as per usual, this team is doing an absolute nothing burger on the glass. Right now, they're outside the top 275 in terms of rebound percentage. You've only got one guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Jamal West Jr. comes over from Nichols, does a little bit of everything. 13 points, 6 boards, a block, a steal per game. But the top 5 scorers for the team are all shooting below 32.1% from 3. Lone guy that really shoots above 32% from 3 on this team is Cassius Brooks, and he has taken, I believe, 8 threes this far this season. So very small sample size with that regard. Again, you got just so many guys that are able to generate turnovers. Tyrese Watson has been the main of them, 2.3 steals per game. But I do think that Norfolk State is going to be able to remain lively, and a Norfolk State team that typically they get absolutely bludgeoned on the glass, they should have a little bit of advantage here. As for Norfolk State, you've been able to get Anthony McComb going for 16 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots 36.5% from 3. And Elijah Jamison, who missed all of last year pretty much due to injury over at Wilmington, 16.5 points. He's been able to shoot 36.5% from 3. You've been able to get 4.5 boards per game out of Javon Ellis. Probably need a little bit more there. And for Norfolk State, this has been a team that they themselves have been okay in terms of generating turnovers. They're not quite on the same level that you're going to be finding with UTEP, but for Norfolk State, year in and year out, they do a pretty solid job with their active hands. They've been a top 250 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And Norfolk State, their line teams only shoot about 31.5% from 3, leave themselves a bit vulnerable on the inside, outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. But I do think that they hold in a game where neither team gets anything going on offense. So by total 128, like the under, and anything above 6, taking those points with Norfolk State. And now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-559, 306-560. UMass Lowell is on the road. They're facing off against Boston U. Boston U is between a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. Total is between 146.5 to a 148.5, and I set Boston U as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, both of these teams have been quite ghastly with regards to their defense. Boston U is currently checking in 332nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. UMass Lowell is 310th, but UMass Lowell has absolutely no chance of being able to win this turnover battle, as right now for this Boston U team, they do a nice job playing slow and controlled, 349th in terms of total possessions per game. And Boston U, they're 268th in the country in terms of turnovers per possession on offense, but UMass Lowell is even worse, 340th in the nation. And we've got a UMass Lowell team that is just 312th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Boston U much more respectable at 151st, as for Boston U, it's been all about Eric McNair helping them out. Michael McNair, who's been supplying 15.5 points per game, shooting over 51% from 3, and Boston U is right now shooting 38% from 3. I think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there, but Boston U has also been a top 225 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, while UMass Lowell has just been outside the top 3 with regards to their overall rebounding, as Ben Defty is a true 7-footer that gives you about 6.5 boards, 12.5 points per game. And flip side, for this Massachusetts Lowell team, it's just a team that just has not been able to find their footing whatsoever. Austin Green, who comes over from Texas State, he's been the main man down low, 14.5 points, 7.5 boards. It's a unit that is shooting about 32% from 3. Dario Yepto has been able to give you 10.5 points, 2.5 assists. He shoots 38.5% from 3, but it just feels like UMass Lowell is playing too fast for their own good. For this UMass Lowell team, in terms of total possessions per game, they're now checking in about 102nd in all of college basketball. For UMass Lowell, you've been able able to get a little bit of production out of J.J. Massaquoi, 11.5 points, about 3 rebounds per game, but he's really a guy that tries to shoot from 3, and he shoots 20% from the outside. Sean Simmons has actually shot 44% from the outside. He's supplying 7 points per game, has dealt with a lot of injury throughout the season, though, and he's probably going to be out of the fold once again, so that's been very much hurting this backcourt, and I do think that with Boston U, even though they've been a little bit sloppy with the ball, they're going to do a nice job in terms of holding up on the glass and find a way to be able to get the job done in this ordeal. I did set my line at a 145.5 with regards to total. Think that Boston U slows this game down, so in on the under, and we'll lay up to 7 with Boston U. 3 is 6-5-61, 3 is 6-5-62. Colgate is on the road against Florida. Florida is a favorite of 29.5 to 30.5 points. Total on this game between 153 to a 154.5, and set a total of a 153.5, so at the 154 plus in on the under, but I did set Colgate as an underdog of 23.5 points. I think that Colgate is going to do a nice job in terms of winning the turnover battle. Florida has the obvious advantage on the glass. Florida is second in the country in terms of rebound percentage with all of the big men down low, and Colgate, they're outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage, but it's a Florida team that's not been great with the backcourt. 342nd in terms of three-point shooting percentage, 272nd in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, while Colgate in their road/neutral court games, 12th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers per possession, with Jalen Cox being that as snake, 16 points, 5.5 assists, 2.3 steals, shoots over 42% from three-point range, and then Kyle Carlismo, that is of relation to PJ Carlismo, shoots 40% from 3, 8.5 points per game. Josh Ayer has been able to give you some pop as well off the bench, shooting 47% from 3, 7.5 points per contest. Team is going to give you absolutely no second and third chances whatsoever. This team is outside the top 300 with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And for Florida, you've got Ruben Chinyelu, give you 10 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. Thomas Howell, 6.5 rebounds, 17.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. But he and Urban Klavzar are pretty much the only two guys on the roster that see consistent playing time. They're shooting above 28.5% from 3. That's been rough, as Boogie Flan just has not been a great fit. 12 points, steal and a half per game, but he's shooting 22.5% from 3. Xavier Lee not doing a bad job of doling out the ball. 5 boards, 3.5 assists, 11.5 points per game. He shoots less than 27% from 3-point range, and I do think that the overall sloppiness they're going to find in the Florida backcourt, despite the fact that they do such a great job on the glass, is going to allow this Colgate team to remain lively. And Florida also generates no turnovers whatsoever. So here at a 153 or less, I'll be in on the over, but mostly seeing 154 plus. I do think that this is going to be just slow enough with Colgate outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game to be able to hold the under. So in on the under, and set Colgate is a 23.5 point dog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. 3 is 6-5-63, 3 is 6-5-64. It is Lehigh on the road against Monmouth. Monmouth is a 7.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 144 to 144.5, and I said a total of a 140.5. I do like the under. You've got a Monmouth group that does really struggle with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Or back outside the top 300 with that regard, but this has been a unit that has been very good in terms of their low post defense. It's a Monmouth team that is in the top 150 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, top 50 team in terms of block shot rate, with Doc Mortar only give you about 3.5 points and 2.5 rebounds per game, but he gives you about 1.3 blocks per game. And then Jason Rivera Torres has been very versatile. 8 boards, 3 assists, steal and a half, block and a half per contest, 14.5 points per game. Was at Vanderbilt and San Francisco, where he saw some significant minutes, and then helping about Stefanos Spatilis along with Justin Ray, combining for 24 points per game. And Ray has been a ray of sunshine from 3-point range, shooting about 39% from the outside. Now, Monmouth has been outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, but they become a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage, and you got a Lehigh team that just is not rebounding whatsoever. This Lehigh team has been based for a little bit more around 3-point shooting over the last few years, and that's down to about 32.5% from 3. Lehigh outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They're outside the top 280 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Hank Alvey gives you about 7 boards, 12 points per game, and you do get about 5 rebounds and 10 points per game out of Joshua Ingram as well. Lone 2 guys on the roster give you over 4.3 rebounds per game. Nasir Whitlock has been the main headline scorer, 20 points per game. He shoots about 36.5% from 3-point range for a Lehigh team that they're not like a sluggishly slow team, but they're about 231st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Monmouth has dialed it back quite a bit this year. They're clocking in right around about 268th in terms of total possessions per game. To the credit of Lehigh, they've been a little bit better in terms of generating turnovers, about 11th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And Andrew Urasovic, who missed a little bit of time to begin the season, now shooting about 35% for 3, 10 points per game, but he gives you absolutely nothing other than overall shooting. So you need a little bit more well-roundedness there. Lehigh is looking to push teams inside despite as they are a top 20 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a slog of a game, but I think that this Lehigh team gets absolutely dump truck down low. So I did set Monmouth as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them. And on the underside by total at a 140.5, 306.565, 306.566. Baylor is playing host to Southern. Southern is a underdog of 24.5 to 26.5 points. 163.5 to 164.5 is the total. And I did set a total of a 160. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got a Southern team that is playing quite quickly right now in terms of total possessions per game, 13th in the country. A little bit of a warp stat by that double overtime game against Washington. If you look on possessions per 40 minutes, closer to about 40th in the country, and Baylor is playing quite fast, 64th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Baylor should be able to have their way down low. You've got a Southern team that's outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and Baylor has been one of the best offensive rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Baylor is right now grabbing a rebound on about 41.6% of their missed shots. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. And Southern, they're not quite doing that in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds. They're more around about 218th in the country. Southern, not the world's worst 2-point shooting percentage defense, but they are outside the top 225 with that regard. And for Southern, last year was a very much Wolves greater than the sum of its parts approach. Now they've been looking to Michael Jacobs to do it all. He's flying 21 points per game, and he does shoot over 40% from 3-point range, but he's been missing the last 2 games, and I do think that results in an under in this spot, and that really hurts the Southern team. I did have to set Baylor as a 28-point favorite because without him in the fold, you're going to get just a lot of mix and match, and you're probably going to be looking a little bit more down low if you're Southern. Malika Adjewald, who comes over from UMass, about 11 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and then you've had Damari Jones be able to fly about 5.5 rebounds, 7 points per game, but those are really the lone 2 guys on the roster that give you over 3.7 rebounds per game. Now, Cam and Borey has been able to actually give you about 3.2 steals per game, but for Baylor, despite the fact that Jocelyn Bodu has been out of the fold, they've still been able to generate those offensive rebounds. And then you've got Cameron Carr and Tonde Yusufu combining for 39 points per game, with Carr shooting 44% from 3. It's a Baylor team that has been allowing a lot of open looks from the outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but with Southern currently having Jacobs out of the fold, and Southern as a whole, they do shoot 37% from 3, but much of that is thanks to what Jacobs is able to do in the backcourt. So I do think that for Baylor, they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job there, and this has been a Southern team that's had a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and I do think that those turnovers going to be costly with regards to this total. So set Baylor as a 28-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in on the under. Set my total at a 160, 306.567, 306.568. Maine hopes to not get Maine there on the road against Drexel, and Drexel finds themselves as a pretty good-sized favorite of 8.5 to 9.5 points. 128.5 is the total, and I'm going to be in on the under. I set my total at 125.5. You've got a Maine team that's just been absolutely terrible on the offensive side of things. This is a Maine group that I believe has broken the 65-point plateau in only 1 game thus far this season, and last we saw them against Canisius, they were unable to get anything going on offense. They scored 43 points against a Canisius team that was outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Maine is right now outside the top 335 in terms of total possessions per game. Drexel's a little bit faster than in past years, but they're still super slow. They're about 298th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Drexel relatively respectable with their 3-point shooting at 34.1%. That goes up to about 37.7% when they're at home. And for Maine, they've actually shot about 34% from 3-point range away from home compared to 25% at home, which that's very, very strange to say the least. But it's a Maine team that last year was able to do a great job of dominating the turnover battle. They lost that entire backcourt from a season ago. Still not the world's worst team at generating turnovers. They're about 77th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Drexel has actually been a little bit better in terms of generating turnovers, especially at home. At home, they become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but where this Maine team really loses the battle is down low. 354th in all of college basketball in terms of rebound percentage. Drexel is a top 130 team, so I did set Drexel as a double-figure favorite of 11.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. With Maine, you don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. TJ Beal comes over from Southeast Missouri State, 11.2 points, 4.7 rebounds per game. He's the main guy, and Maine shoots 31.5% for 3 while turning the ball over 15 times per game. They're outside the top 350 in terms of their overall ball security. You're not getting a ton out of Ace Flagg, the brother of Cooper Flagg. He's certainly not his brother, and for Drexel, this team has been doing a nice job of mixing and matching on the glass. You've got a pair of guys that really don't give you a lot of scoring in William Garcia Adson along with Garfield Turner combining for about 12 rebounds per game. They only combine for about 12 points per game, but do a rock solid job there. You've had Josh Reed shoot 37.5% from 3 with 8.5 points per game. Victor Panoff has been a nice sharpshooter, 42% 3-point shooter, 8.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. Drexel, again, they don't necessarily do the world's greatest job around the perimeter in terms of generating turnovers, but they've been a little bit better this year. Drexel also outside the top 250 in terms of their own ball security, so I think that you get a sloppy game, but I think that Drexel is absolutely able to control things inside. That allows them to be able to get the job done. So by total 125.5, I like the under, and I'm going to lay up to 11 here with Drexel. 3-6-5-69, 3-6-5-70. SMU plays those to Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas, an underdog of 22.5 points, and your total is 152.5. Give me the points here with Central Arkansas. I did set them as an underdog of 17 points. Central Arkansas has been much more respectable this year, and they're still a fast team. They're not necessarily a warp speed team, but I mean, it's a Central Arkansas team that in the past they've just played way too fast for their own good. Now they're about 112th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. SMU is very much looking to gun it. They are 20th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this SMU team, solid but not great on the glass, about 100th in the country in terms of rebound percentage, as you've got Samat Yedoglu, who's been able to do a nice job getting the team about 8.5 rebounds per game, but they don't necessarily have the world's greatest depth. For Central Arkansas, they've been much more respectable in terms of their low post play. Still have something to be desired there. They're still right around about 300th in the country in terms of 2-point shooting percentage of opponents, but still, you've been able to have Ty Robinson give you 12 points, 5 boards. He's not necessarily going to give you a lot of versatility, but you have a Central Arkansas team that's done a really good job in terms of generating turnovers. Each of your top 5 scores give you at least 1 steal per game. That includes Cameron Hunter, 16 points, 1.7 steals. He only shoots about 30% from 3, and that is the big issue that you have with Central Arkansas. They shoot about 30.2% from 3, hovering right around about 300th in all of college basketball with that regard, but they've been a top 225 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they've been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They do have to go up against an SMU backcourt that has Kevin Miller. I absolutely refuse to call him Boopy, but he's been able to do a really good job in terms of his backcourt. He's been able to make teams go boop with the way that he gives you 20 points, 6.5 assists. He shoots 42% from 3. SMU as a whole, a little bit below average with regards to their 3-point shooting at 33%. Now, they're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from 3 as well, so they've been pretty rock solid with that regard, but it is an SMU team that has been, shall we say, giving up a few too many second and third chances, other than Yedoglu, who's been able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game. You've got Jerron Pierre, Corey Washington combining for about 12 boards per contest, but with these two guys, they're a little bit more of scores. Corey Washington, about 13 points and a little bit over a steal per game. Pierre, he's giving you 19 points per game, average over 20 points per contest over at Jacksonville State, and with this Central Arkansas team, way that they've been able to do a much better job in terms of generating turnovers. I think that that's just enough for them to remain lively in this game, and with Central Arkansas dialing it back, I set my total at 151, so here at the 152.5, like the under and the points with Central Arkansas. 3-6-5-71, 3-6-5-72. Loyola Maryland is on the road against George Mason. George Mason is a 24 to a 24.5 point favorite. 147.5 to 148 is the total. Set my line at 24, so now that we're getting to 24.5, I'm willing to take a shot on Loyola Maryland. This George Mason team just continues to be very rock solid, both with regards to their rebounding and in terms of their defense. This team is currently 36th in the country in terms of their overall rebound percentage, and they're not quite top 10 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis like they were a season ago, but they're not too far from it at 38th. And for Loyola Maryland, this has been a team that has been lackadaisical with their defense. They're 98th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do have to face a George Mason team that has been a top 50 team with regards to 3-point shooting percentage. Corey Mincy, 15 plus points per game. He's shooting over 40% from 3. That's going to be hard to match up with, but for Loyola Maryland, you've got a quartet of guys who have been able to give you at least 11.5 points per game. Emmett Adair, who was missing for the beginning part of the season, he's come back with 12.5 points, 5.5 boards. Now, the only of these guys that shoots above 30% from 3 is Jordan Stemke, 11.5 points. He's been able to shoot about 40.5% from 3, but Jacob Theodusu, along with Braden Speed, these two guys are combining for about 27.5 points per game and 3.5 steals per contest as well. Loyola Maryland has been a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. A little bit more of a mid-tempo team this year, about 182nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And George Mason, they're playing once again pretty slow and controlled, 301st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Loyola Maryland does shoot 62.9% the free throw line. If they were the favorite, that would be a big time concern there. But that said, you do have a George Mason team that, while they've been able to do a relatively solid job with their 3-point shooting percentage, they still do from time to time leave a little bit of something to be desired with their offense, especially being outside the top 200 in terms of ball security. And they're only about 200th with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Riley Allen patch, 12.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's been rock solid, and he's able to give you a bit of 3-point shooting at 32%. Jari Long shoots 53% from 3 with about 12 points per game. Have to figure that goes downward a little bit, but for George Mason, I do think that the defense is certainly going to be able to win out. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of second and third chances here for Loyola Maryland, but do feel like this number has gone up just a little bit too far, especially George Mason having a few turnovers concerns. So semi-total 142, like the under, and at 24.5 plus, won't take those points with Loyola. 3-6-5-73, 3-6-5-74. Manhattan is going to be playing against the Presbyterian, and Presbyterian is a 2.5 to a 1.5 point road favorite. 137.5 to 138 is the total, and I made Manhattan the 3-point favorite. I do like them outright on the money line. You got a Presbyterian team that's in the bottom 3 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. No tempo whatsoever, but just because you play slow doesn't mean that you play amazing defense. And Presbyterian, not bad on defense, not amazing, 172nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Manhattan has been a ghastly 339th, but it feels like the defense is starting to get a little bit better with this team. A big reason why Manhattan has struggled to begin the season. Will Sidner, one of their top returning scorers, he is still ineligible for this team, so that really hurts them. But you've got Frazier tonight at the Roxborough giving you about 11.5 points, 6 boards. He's shooting 32% from 3 after last year at 6'7", shot well over 45% from 3. But Devin Dinkins and Jaden Winston, I think, are going to be able to dominate in the backcourt. These two guys combined for about 29.5 points, 5.5 assists per game. And Dinkins shoots 36% from 3, Winston 37.5% from the outside. And for Manhattan, they've been a top 175 team in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. Now, where Manhattan has really been going wrong is on the glass. They are outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage, and that is a big advantage that this Presbyterian team is going to be having. But for Presbyterian, this has been a unit that has been having a very difficult time in terms of their backcourt and being able to take care of the ball. The main attribute for Presbyterian that has been winning out for them has been their overall rebounding, as you've got a man with a great last name, and Jalen Peterson give you about 8.7 rebounds per game, and Jonah Pierce 13.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. But Presbyterian outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Team is shooting 29% from 3. That is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. Carl Parrish, he's right now shooting 37.5% from the outside, 13 points per game. He is the only out of their top 8 scorers that shoots above 29.5% from 3-point range. And I do think that the overall sloppiness of Presbyterian, along with a very, very slow play, is going to be working to their detriment in this spot. With Presbyterian, they should be able to give themselves some second chances, top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but I do think that this Manhattan team is going to be able to do just enough to get the job done against a rather shaky backcourt. I did set my total at 139. I think that you get some late game fouling for the over, so like the over and Manhattan on the money line, 3-6-5-75, 3-6-5-76. Furman is playing also Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is a underdog here of 9.5 points. 152.5 is the total, and with Charleston Southern, I did set them as an underdog of 7.5 points, so right now catching the 8+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now, one thing that Charleston Southern does not do is generate turnovers. They are well outside the top 350 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but the overall 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage defense has been very solid. They are currently, Charleston Southern is 124th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this Furman defense has not been great, to say the least. Furman has actually dialed back their tempo. Right now for Furman, 249th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 271st in terms of total possessions per game, while Charleston Southern, they're very much looking to push tempo, 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Charleston Southern, they've got one of the most underrated players that you're going to find in all of college basketball, mainly because he's been coming off the bench throughout much of the season, Bryson Blaine, and he's been giving you 19 points, 7.5 boards, just under 4 assists on 40% 3-point shooting. Alan Sumler has been an ace number 2 scorer, 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 43% from 3-point range. And this is a Charleston Southern group that has become a top 175 team in terms of their rebound percentage. They are a top 80 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And for Furman, this is just not the same team that they were a season ago, because they lose their top guards from a season ago. They bring back a lot of their big men, Cooper Bowser along Charles Johnson. Both of these guys are 6'11". Johnson, 10 points, 9 rebounds. He's able to pop it from 3, and Bowser, 13.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. But for Furman, they're shooting 30% from 3. That's outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. In a nip-and-tuck game, they shoot 63.1% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 25 mark in all of college basketball. Furman outside the top 250 in terms of ball security with about 13.5 turnovers per game. doing a solid job on the glass. They've been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. Ben Vanderbilt, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 7.5 points per game. So some nice versatility there. But I do think that the overall turnovers, with Furman also being a team outside the top 280 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, that is going to be costly. And I mean, for Furman, they always do a nice job with their 2-point shooting percentage. They're back in the top 10 with that regard. But I just don't know if it's going to be enough in this spot with all the turnovers. Semi-total 149.5. I like the under and at 8+. Take the points with Charleston Southern, 306-577, 306-578. VMI is going to be on the road against Radford, and Radford is a favorite here of 10.5 points. 155.5 is the total line with VMI. Set them as an 8.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. It's a Radford team that's looking to crank up their tempo. Top 45 team in terms of total possessions per game. VMI a little bit more slow and controlled, 236th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and VMI ghastly with their defense, 343rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not like this Radford team is batting down the hatches themselves, 229th in the country in points allowed on a per possession basis. And I did have to set Radford as only an 8.5 point favorite because this team has just not necessarily been a great 3-point shooting team right now for Radford. They take a lot of threes, but they're only shooting about 31.7%. Now, much better at home at about 37.5% from the outside. But I do think that VMI is going to be able to elevate from the fact that right now they are 322nd with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. And the big reason why the VMI offense has struggled as much as it has been the injury to Ricky Bradley. He's been out for so much of the season that has really been costly for this team, but you've been able to get good production in the interim out of TJ Johnson. Very good versatility with about 18.5 points, 8 boards. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but you've had Mario Tatum Jr. along the line as Holstrom being able to combine for about 22 points per game. Both guys shoot above 36% from 3-point range. This is not a VMI team that's necessarily going to dominate on the glass outside the top 225 with regards to rebound percentage, but do have a Radford team that they themselves do have their issues with regards to their interior play. Radford has been able to get quite a bit of good rebounding, 6.5 points, 6.5 boards out of Tyson Brown, and then you've got Dennis Parker who comes over from NC State. He had that just amazing performance against Coppin State a few nights ago where he had 53 points, and as a matter of fact, he has scored a combined 79 points and 19 rebounds in the last 2 games, so he's really been able to elevate there. And then you've got Del Jones from Clemson giving you about 14.5 points per game, but outside those 2 guys, it's just a big giant mismatch for this team. Radford has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're currently outside the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage. They've been about 300th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That should allow VMI some open looks from 3-point range, and with Radford being well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and VMI being so inefficient with their defense, I think they get a high scoring affair where VMI holds in there. Semi-total 158.5, like the over, and the points with VMI, 306-579, 306-580. Tennessee is playing us at Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb, a 42 to 42.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 149.5, and I said Tennessee is a 41.5 point favorite. I'm willing to take 42 plus here with Gardner Webb, despite the fact that Gardner Webb has been just absolutely deplorable this year. Gardner Webb right now is outside the top 300 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do get to go up against a Tennessee team that you almost fear that it's a little bit of a letdown spot after they had that massive win a few nights ago. They were able to have that just very dramatic triumph after they got the job done against Louisville. And for Tennessee, the one big forte that this team has, they are tremendous on the offensive glass. Tennessee is right now grabbing 43.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is numero uno in all of college basketball. And this is the Gardner Webb team that back in the day when things were really rocking and rolling for them, they were actually quite good on the glass. They are now outside the top 250 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. As a matter of fact, outside the top 300, as you've got Jacob Hogreth give you 11.8 rebounds per game. The only other player with more than 3.2 rebounds per game is Jacob Hudson, 10.5 points, 2 assists, 4.5 rebounds per game, and Gardner Webb outside the top 240 with regards to their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, outside the top 200 in terms of their free throw shooting percentage, outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. But I do think that they do just enough to be able to hold in there. We've seen a little bit of better play recently out of this team. They were able to hold in there in that game against Georgia Southern. They got to 80 plus in that game, and I do think they're going to be able to get enough scoring here for the over. I did set my total at 151.5, mainly because Gardner Webb is one of the worst defenses that you're going to find in all of college basketball, but Gardner Webb is sped up to being 99th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Tennessee, they're about 206th in terms of total possessions per game. They're a little bit faster than in past years. Tennessee back in the top 15 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're getting very good production out of Jacoby Gillespie, 17.5 points, 5.5 assists to about 2.5 turnovers per game, but again, they are turning the ball over 13 times per game. A little bit of an issue, offset by the second and third chances that you get out of these guys like a Felix Apara, 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Nate Amond, 16 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, steal and a half per contest. And for Tennessee, teams are shooting only about 28.5% from 3 against them. top 50 team in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. I do, though, think that with a lot of kids away from break, Gardner-Webb does just enough to hold in there, and I think that Gardner-Webb continues to suck it up on defense. Set my line at 41.5, so 42 plus, taking the points with Gardner-Webb, and I do like the over at 306-581, 306-582. Cornell is on the road against Albany. Albany is a home underdog of 5.5 points total on this game. It is 168.5, and with Albany, I set them as an underdog of 9 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's an Albany team that's really not doing a whole heck of a lot right now, and they face off against a Cornell team that's been very good with regards to their 3-point shooting, and that's really the one thing that Albany's been able to do okay. Albany is allowing teams to shoot less than 32.5% from 3-point range, so that helps out quite a bit. You're not going to get a lot of second and third chances in this game. Cornell 256th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Albany is 267, so both teams leaving something to be desired there. But this is a Cornell team that, even though they're facing off against a relatively good 3-point shooting defense, they shoot 40.2% from 3-point range overall and on the road. I think that that's going to be able to travel in this spot. And you've got an Albany team that has been very not great in terms of taking care of the ball outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. With Albany, you've got Amir Lindsay, who's been supplying 16 points, 4.5 assists, shoots 37% from 3. And I will say Nasir Muhammad and Zach Matalu have been very nice 10-point per game scores. They combine shoot about 38% from 3-point range, but there's just not a ton down low for the team. Matalu's been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. Akuchi Okeke has been able to give you 9.6 rebounds per game as well. And for this Albany team, I mean, that's about it for them. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage. And for Cornell, they're actually much better on the glass than they have been in past seasons. Casper Sepp, who comes over from Valparaiso, has been able to help out in a big way there. Only about 6 points per game, but he also gives you 6 rebounds per game. Gives this team a little bit more balance. And for Cornell, top 10 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. Not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances. And this is a Cornell team that's outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But you've got an Albany defense that they don't necessarily do much by way of being able to take away the ball, and with Cornell, because they take so many threes, it actually sets up for a lot of good looks from 2-point range as well. They've been a top 25 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, and Albany just gets absolutely laying base it down low, 312th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Have a Cornell team that's about 291st with that regard as well, but with Cornell being able to get back Jake Feigen, who missed about 4 games due to injury, he's been able to supply about 14 points, 5 boards, shoots 45% from 3. Adam Song Hinton has been able to shoot 48% for 3 with 14.5 points per game. Cooper Nora had 20 points per game. I do think that this collective for Cornell finds a way to be able to get the job done, and it's going to be a little bit of a tempo battle. You've got a Cornell team that's 15th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Albany looking to play quite a bit more slowly, as they're right now checking in about 178th in terms of total possessions per game, but Albany and their overall sloppiness on offense, I think, costs you the over. So my total at a 167. So at a 168 plus in on the under, and willing to lay with Cornell. 306-583, 306-584. UMBC is on the road against South Florida. South Florida a 21.5 to a 22.5 point favor. 157.5 to a 158.5 is the total, and the UMBC made them an underdog of 15.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. With South Florida, they've been really good at generating turnovers. Top 45 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for UMBC, it's been a little bit hot and cold in terms of this offense. They've actually dialed things back quite a bit from past seasons. UMBC, right now, they're checking in just 266th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, while South Florida absolutely gunning it. They are currently number 5 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, so you're going to get a little bit of a tempo war going on here for UMBC. One of the main things for the team is that they've had 2 buzzer beater wins already thus far this season, both of those coming off the hand of DJ Turner-Armstrong, 11.5 points, 2.7 assists per game, and he's their main 3-point shooter at about 40.5% from 3. We've seen UMBC's 3-point shooting take a little bit of a dive this year, down to about 34.5%, and the team has been outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers per possession. One thing that they do, though, is they play very smart. They're a top 30 team in terms of fewest fouls committed on a per possession basis. They're not going to put you under duress at all. This UMBC team outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but the overall defense has not been too bad for this team. Down low, it's a UMBC team that's been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they're a much better 3-point shooting defense than you're going to be finding with South Florida. Now, South Florida is a team that's very much going to be looking to take quite a few threes, and for the South Florida bunch, they are going to be able to take advantage of the fact that while UMBC only allows teams to shoot about 31% from 3-point range at home, on the road, that does go to about 40%, and South Florida's funky stats as well. 289th in the country in terms of overall opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, 26.7% at home, 40.5% away from home. I do think that that's going to iron out a little bit more, and for South Florida. I've been very impressed by what I've seen out of Josh Omajafu. He's been really one of your main guys with 15 plus points per contest. He's right now supplying the team with about 5 boards, 2 assists per game, and he's shooting 35% from 3. Joseph Pignon and Isaiah Nelson both give you 14 points per game. They've followed Brian Hodgson on over from Arkansas State. Nelson, that top rebounder with about 9.5 boards, block and half per contest, and Pignon has been able to give you 2 steals per game, but South Florida as a whole, they're only shooting about 31.5% from 3, outside the top 250 with that regard. They have been really good on the offensive glass, a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but I do think that the way that UMBC has been able to hold up down low is going to be just enough for them to be able to hold in this game. And with this UMBC team, even though they've got a few turnover woes, I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more down low with having Josh Odowandu, who is out for the beginning of the season, coming back, giving you about 5.5 rebounds per game, so that way they don't get as line-based on the glass. I did set my total at a 157.5, so going to be willing to take the points with UMBC, and with regards to the total right now, seeing it at a 158.5, I'm in on the under. 306.585, 306.586. UAB is playing out to UNC Asheville, and Asheville is an underdog of 14.5 points. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total line for Asheville. I did set them as an underdog of 11.5 points, so here at the 14 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points. UAB really good at taking care of the ball, top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and we should continue to see a little bit of positivity for this UAB team from the outside, but this is one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball right now. They're shooting 28.7% as a collective. You've got Chance Westery, who's been able to supply 16.5 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 per contest, but he shoots 30% from 3. Ahmad Robinson has really been the top 3-point shooter, 36% from the outside, comes in for Mercer, 13 points, 4 assists per game, and it's a UAB team that they've been a relatively rock-solid defense, top 125 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're a top 30 team on the glass in terms of rebound percentage, so Asheville very much going to have their hands full, but I do think that UNC Asheville going to be able to hold in there because this has been a team with some very active hands, that they both have turned the ball over a little bit too much themselves. They're outside the top 3 in terms of ball security, but they've been able to do a nice job as well in terms of guarding the perimeter, top 175 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and for this UNC Asheville team, they're a top 225 team with regards to rebound percentage, with Toya Solomon giving you 16.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest. You've got some good 3-point shooting with Justin Wright being Mr. Wright, 17.5 points, shoots 49% from the outside with about a steal and a half per contest. You've had Connor Davitsky for the entirety of the season, so you've needed DJ Patrick to be able to step up, and DJ has turned it up. 10.5 points, 4 boards, shoots 40% from 3-point range, has a nice little bit of a combo player right around about 6'6". For UNC Asheville, this team is a top 80 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They shoot about 37% as a collective, and they've been a top 150 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage as well. This is a UAB team that's been about country average with regards to both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They do a nice job not putting teams on the free throw line, but I do think that you're going to get a pretty clean game with regards to the possessions, and you're going to get a little bit of a tempo war. With UAB, they're about 128th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Asheville sold themselves down to about 233rd. I did set a total here of a 153.5, so here at the 152.5, think that you get just enough efficiency for the over, like the over and the points with Asheville. 306.587, 306.588. You've got Northern Arizona on the road against Incarnate Word, and the Word is a 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 142.5, and with Incarnate Word, I did set them as a favorite here of 10 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with the Word. Now, this Incarnate Word team is outside the top 320 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they play very slow and very efficiently on offense. Incarnate Word is about 330th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Incarnate Word right now, in their home games, they're allowing teams to shoot 20% from 3-point range, and I certainly do think that we're going to see a little bit of regression there, and as I mentioned, the fact that Incarnate Word is so inefficient on the defensive side of things, they have been giving up about 15.9 points fewer per 100 possessions when they have been at home rather than away from home. Meanwhile, you've got a Northern Arizona group that they're not too bad with regards to their defense, about 204th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It is a Northern Arizona team that is going to give up a little bit more on the outside, and for Northern Arizona last year, they were one of the top defensive rebounding teams in all of college basketball. That's taken a massive step back. They're allowing teams to grab about 36.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound in a roadside shoot core venue, and for Incarnate Word, this has been a team that's been very good with their 3-point shooting. They're shooting about 38% from 3-point range at home with Davion Bailey being that top scorer with about 21.5 points, 3.5 boards, only about a pair of assists per game. They've taken the ball out of his hands a little bit more this year with Tosh Javosky coming over from Cleveland State. He's been the main facilitator, 2.5, 5 assists, 17.5 points per game for an Carter Ward team that's been a top 125 team in terms of their overall ball security. And for Carter Ward, they do a tremendous job of being able to give themselves second and third chances, top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They're resulting in offensive rebounds. So Northern Arizona is going to have a tough time there. And Northern Arizona had to pretty much replace each of their top 3 scorers from a season ago. Now, they've been able to get good production here out of Zach Davidson, 5.5 boards, 15.5 points per game, but he's not really going to give you a ton from three-point range. Now, that's the job of Ryan Abelman along with Isaiah Shaw. Shaw shooting 44% for three, 89% free throw line with about 10 points per game. Abelman, he has been able to give you about 12.5 points and 5.5 rebounds per game, but the team is not really giving themselves a lot of second and third chances. Northern Arizona outside the top 275 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and with them giving it up from three-point range at about 34.5%, I do think that Carter Ward going to be nice and efficient in terms of getting the job done, and Northern Arizona's main forte on defense being a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Don't think that they generate as many of those turnovers. Semi-total at a 142. Again, Carter Ward just so slow that I think that you get an under in this game, but I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9.5 here with Carter Ward. 3-6, 589, 3-6, 590. St. Louis plays host to New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a 31.5 point underdog total on this game, between 149.5 to a 151.5, and I said St. Louis as a 32-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, with this St. Louis team, the one thing that's been an issue for them is turnovers. Outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, everything else has been very supreme, and they face off against a New Hampshire team that just hasn't been able to shoot well. I mean, I wish I could put it any other way, but they're outside the top 300 in terms of their own 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now, New Hampshire, about a country average team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're not the world's worst team on the glass. That said, they have to go up against a St. Louis team that's been able to do a very good job in terms of being able to light it up from three-point range. For St. Louis, they are shooting 40.5% from three-point range at home, and they're not even just having Robbie Avila going off night in and night out. Robbie Avila hasn't even been actually the top scorer thus far this season for St. Louis, as that's been a little bit of a revolving door for this team. Currently, that belongs to Deion Brown, who's been able to give you 13 points, 7 boards, very versatile, and then Trey Green shoots 48% for three, 12.5 points per game. Amir McCautry has been able to throw in there about 12 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists per game, and for St. Louis, each of your top 5 scores do give you at least 2 assists per game, with Avila only about 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, but is much more efficient than a season ago, shooting over 46% from three-point range. And for St. Louis, they've been a top 20 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, top 30 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Opponents are shooting less than 30% from 3 against them as well, and this team has been oh so dominant on the glass. With New Hampshire, you just don't have a ton of size with this unit. You've had Balil El-Shakiri at 6'8", be able to give you 8 rebounds, 11.5 points per game. He is pretty much the only guy other than John Squire who comes over from Pepperdine, give you over 4.4 rebounds per game, so that's going to be a bit of an issue for this unit. And with this New Hampshire team, they're about country average in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 250 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it's a New Hampshire team that's going to be looking to play relatively slow and controlled, while you do have a St. Louis team that they are very much looking to bump up the tempo. With St. Louis, they're currently clocking in about 33rd in terms of total possessions per game. New Hampshire is 242nd. I do think that the St. Louis defense does just enough to be able to preserve an under. I set my total at a 150. Right now, we're between 149.5 to a 151.5. Personally, I would rather have that 151.5 under rather than the 149.5 over. So looking at the under on anything above 150, and want to lay up to 31.5 here with St. Louis. 3-6, 591, 3-6, 592. The Battle of A&M, East Texas A&M on the road against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, a 26.5 point favorite. 158.5 is the total, and set a total of 155.5. I'm in on the under. You've got a Texas A&M team that is absolutely looking to gun it. It's year number 1 under Bucky McMillan, and they have elevated themselves to currently being number 19 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. East Texas A&M, more of a mid-tempo team at about 142nd in terms of total possessions per game, and both of these teams are shooting it quite well from 3. Texas A&M, they shoot 40.3% from 3 at home, 37.4% overall. That's the top 50 mark in all of college basketball. East Texas A&M was absolutely terrible with their 3-point shooting a season ago. It's not great, but they're up to about 199th this season, and with East Texas A&M, I did set them as a 27.5 point underdog, so 27 is my max lay here with Texas A&M, but I'm going to be willing to do so. And both of these teams do have some similar characteristics, as both of these teams are top 75 teams in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but Texas A&M is just flat out better at it, and they've got better athletes. You've got Marcus Hill and Ryan Griffin combined for about 24 points per game. With Griffin, he's been able to shoot 41% for 3 assists per game. Now for Texas A&M, they haven't necessarily found that main point guard Shar Griffin has been able to do a little bit of facilitation. Jakari Lane, Josh Holloway, both give you 3+ assists per game. Both are between about 6.5 to 7 points per game. But this team just has so many different options right now. They've got essentially 10 different guys. They're seeing over 13 minutes per game. So they just have a smorgasbord of different guys. And Mackenzie Mbakbo, he missed the early part of the season. He's come back. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 4 rebounds per game, while Ruben Dominguez, he's playing about 14 points per contest. And for this East Texas A&M team, you've been able to get quite a bit of production on the Charleston St transfer, Ronnie Harrison. He's been able to elevate this team with about 13.5 points, 5 boards, shoots 36% from 3. And they do get to go up against the Texas A&M team that's outside the top 250 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. East Texas A&M is the exact same, though. And with this East Texas A&M team, you just don't have a lot of guys down low that can match up on the glass, as right now Harrison's the only guy that gives you over 5.1 rebounds per game. So that's going to be quite a bit of an issue for this team. You've got an East Texas A&M team that as well has been just not giving themselves any second and third chances outside the top 340 in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And I do think that that's going to be costly for the over, because I do think that both of these teams are going to generate plenty of turnovers. So my total at a 155.5. I like the under end with Texas A&M. I just think that they're a much better form of East Texas A&M. Set my line at 27.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number 306.593, 306.594. You've got North Florida on the road against Miami of Florida. Miami 35.5 to 36.5 point favorites. 167.5 to 168.5 is the total. Set my line at 34. I'm going to be willing to take the points with North Florida. Now, North Florida is a line team to grab over 46% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is probably the worst offensive rebound percentage I have ever seen in my life. For North Florida, they are outside the top 350 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But the one thing about this North Florida team is that they are actually very good in terms of being able to just go bombs away from 3 points. For North Florida, they're shooting 34.5% from 3-point range away from home. That's a top 150 mark in all of college basketball. They will go up against a Miami team that's now going to be a little bit shorthanded, as very unfortunate. One of their star forwards and one of their star freshmen, Marcus Allen, he's done for the season. So that's a little bit of an issue. But you still have great depth with this team. True Washington, Shelton Henderson, these two guys have come in. They've been able to combine for 27 points per game. Miami has been a top 30 team with regards to rebound percentage, with Malika Renew leading the way, 20.5 points, 7 boards, and then Trey Donaldson, he throws in their 7 assists to 2.2 turnovers per game. It's a Miami team that has been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and while Miami plays fast, they're not necessarily warp speed fast like North Florida. North Florida 48th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Miami hovering right around about 84th, though Miami has been playing quite a bit more quickly when they've been at home rather than away from home, and I do think that this is a game that gets just absolutely harebrained and crazy, so I did set a total of a 168. I'm going to be in on the over. You've got a North Florida team that I think Cameron Oriel's going to do enough to be able to help them hold in this number, 17.5 points, 3.5 assists. He shoots 40% from 3, and then Trey Caddy along with BJ Plummer, they both shoot above 46% from 3. Between the two of them, about 19 points per game. Not a single guy on the roster gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game. Mason Lee, 4.5 rebounds per game. That's right now your top guy, and this is a North Florida team that just gets absolutely blasted on the inside. Outside the top 355 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they're about a country average team in terms of guarding the 3-point line, so they haven't been too bad there, and this is a team that, as per usual, they take more 3-point shots than 2-point shots. Do think that Miami's going to be able to win this game handily, but I think we've gone just a little bit too far with regards to this number. Semi-total at a 168, so seeing that 167.5, I like the over, and I'm willing to take anything above 34 with North Florida. 306.595, 306.596. You got TCU playing OSU, Florida A&M. A&M is an underdog of 30.5 points. 139.5 is the total line. Set a total of 149.5. I do like the over now. For Florida A&M, they are dead last in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis in a road/neutral venue, but they are also playing at warp speed. This is a Florida A&M team that currently, in terms of total possessions per game, they're 21st in the country. TCU country average, they're right around about 185th in the country. I do think that Florida A&M doing for a little bit of positivity with their offense, but I still set them as a 31.5 point dog. I'm going to be willing to lay it, mainly because Florida A&M also outside the top 295 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as teams are shooting over 37% from 3-point range against them. And for Florida A&M outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage, you've had Micah Octave in the 2 games that he's actually played be able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game, but he's been banged up throughout the entirety of the season, and that's a big issue for this Florida A&M team. Like half the team is injured. You've got Antonio Baker and Jordan Chapman who are going to be all good to go, giving you combined about 22 points per game. Chapman shooting 36.5% from three, one of the main holdovers from a season ago. And Anquan Bolden Jr., yes, the son of that Anquan Bolden, 7.5 points, 4 boards, but has never really been a sharpshooter from the outside. This team is just going to give up, in my opinion, a lot of second and third chances to a TCU team that has been a top 20 team in terms of their overall points allowed on a per possession basis on defense. This is a very good team in terms of generating turnovers, and I think that they're going to be able to turn those into fast break buckets as TCU top 25 team in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis, and David Punch is going to absolutely punch this team down low. 14 points, 2.5 blocks, right around about 8 rebounds per game. One guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but Micah Robinson has been very versatile. 9 points, 5 boards. He shoots in the high 30s from 3-point. Jaden Pierre up to about 41.5% 3-point shooting. And for TCU, they had a little bit of a cold start to the season with their offense, 72 plus points, and now 5 out of their last 7 games with Brock Harding doing a nice job, doling up 5.5 assists, only about 1.8 turnovers per game. TCU a top 150 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and they've been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage as well. Do think that TCU is going to be able to get the job done against a Florida A&M team that's just playing way too fast for their own good. So by 12, 149.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 31 with TCU. 365.97, 365.98. Wichita State plays us to Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, an underdog here of 13.5 points. Total on this game, 141.5 to 142.5, and it's at a total of 148.5. I do like the over. You've got an Eastern Kentucky team that they always like to play quite up tempo, and they always love to be able to generate turnovers. For Eastern Kentucky, right now they are clocking in about 144th in terms of total possessions per game. A little bit slower than in the past, and Wichita State is way slower than they have been in past years. They're down to about 311th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but after Wichita State was outside the top 320 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage last year, back up to a respectable about 164th this year, while you've got an Eastern Kentucky team that typically is quite good with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They're down to about 274th in the country, and I think that they're going to have a lot of issues with the Berg, as you've got Mr. Wilberg, who comes over from Purdue, giving the team 7.7 rebounds per game, and it's a big reason why I just have Wichita State as a 16.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Eastern Kentucky. Still a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but not quite what it was a season ago. And to the credit of Eastern Kentucky, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to grab themselves second and third chances, but now they have to go up against a Wichita State team that's been very sure-handed on the glass. Wichita State, a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and Eastern Kentucky, to their credit, they're about country average in terms of their own defensive rebound percentage. Now for Eastern Kentucky, they very much do rely upon those second chances, 67th in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but just not going to be able to get that on this size. And you've got Juan Cranford, Alon Thompson Ball, who've been able to combine for Eastern Kentucky 24.5 points per game, and Cranford shoots 37% from 3-point range, but also with Eastern Kentucky, because they gamble so much for turnovers, they leave themselves very vulnerable with regards to their defensive shooting percentages. They're outside the top 285 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. For Wichita State, you've had the UNC Greensboro transfer Keenan Giles lead the way with 17.5 points on nearly 40% 3-point shooting, and for Wichita State, top 40 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. I mentioned Berg a little bit before, but how about Kieran Boyd? He comes in from East Tennessee, 10 points, 6 boards. He's right now shooting 38% from 3. Drake Kindle, he shoots 41% from the outside, about 9 points per contest. And then Emmanuel Okafor, he doesn't really give you a lot of scoring, but about 5 rebounds per game, with Wichita State being a top 75 team in terms of ball security and doing a nice job executing on offense. I do think that they get the job done in a game that's going to be involving a little bit more scoring with open opportunities. So I'm on the line at 16.5. I'm willing to lay with Wichita State, like the over semi total at a 148.5. 365.99, 306.600. Chattanooga is on the road against Alabama A&M. A&M is a underdog here of 1.5 points. 138.5 is the total. Set Chattanooga is a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number. Chattanooga has had to slow themselves down from a season ago, losing so much of that backcourt. Right now, they're about 315th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've had a major switch over with this Alabama A&M team as well. Right now, for Alabama A&M in that new look style, they're about 296th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, as Alabama A&M looking a lot more like Grambling from a season ago, mainly because they hired on Dante Jackson from Grambling, and he brought with him quite a few of his main guys. Contavious Dozer, who's the top scorer, followed him 14 points, shoots 36% from 3-point. James Graham along with PJ Eason did as well. Both are going to give you 7.5 points per game, but Graham right now deals with injury. He's been missing for 4 games, probably going to be out once again. You do have, though, Eason giving you about 7 rebounds and a block and a half per contest, but this has been a Alabama A&M team that has been outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. This Alabama A&M team just absolutely getting blasted on the glass as well, outside the top 250 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. And the Chattanooga team, their main weakness is down low, as you just don't have a lot of rebounding with Chattanooga. That's just a style that Dan Earl plays, but For Chattanooga, you've had Jordan Frinson be able to step up at a big way, 14 points. He's right now shooting 42% from three-point range after he was at the non-D1 ranks 8 seasons ago. It's been a lot of mix and match in terms of backcourt, as this team, they always take more threes than twos. This is a Chattanooga team that right now is in the top 15 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range, but they've been able to find a few guys to really be able to light it up, like Tate Darner. He comes in off the bench, shoots 49% for three, 8.5 points per game, and then Teddy Washington, he comes over from Southeast Missouri State. He's a guy that really doesn't shoot it from three, but he just gives this team balance. 4 boards, 11 points, a little bit over a steal per game. And for Chattanooga, even though this team is very much based around three-point shooting, they're still a top 100 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. And to the credit of Chattanooga, they've been a little bit better defensively than they have been in past years. They're a top 175 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not a team that generates a lot of turnovers, and that finds them outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But you've also got an Alabama A&M team that just has not really been able to execute offensively themselves. They've been quite sloppy with the ball, and as a result, they are finding themselves outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I do, though, think that with Chattanooga being inefficient on defense, with Alabama A&M giving up so much down low, that you get just enough for the over, especially with somebody Kim Felling. I think that this is a tight game. Made my total a 141, so I'm going to be in on the over. And with Chattanooga, made them the 3-point favorite, willing to lay the small number. 3-6-6-0-1, 3-6-6-0-2. Austin P is on the road against UMKC, a.k.a. Kansas City. Kansas City, a 7.5-point home underdog. 144.5 to a 145.5 is the total. I set my total at a 136.5. I like the under. Now, for UMKC, they're just playing too fast for their own good. I think that they're realizing it. They've dialed it back by about 5 possessions per game over the last 5 games, slower than they had been to begin the season. Overall, they're still about 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but the offensive efficiency is really going to be lacking in this game. You got a UMKC team has 343rd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 318th in turnovers per possession, 356th in 3-point shooting percentage, and Austin P is 272nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But you've got an Austin P defense that travels. They are currently 29th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're going to take advantage of UMKC not taking care of the ball. 22nd in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in a roadside-neutral venue, and I'm willing to lay with this Austin P team. Set them as an 8.5-point favorite, as Colin Parker has done a nice job leading the way with 15 points, 6 boards, a steal per game, shoots over 40% from 3. Dave McCuban, 6'8" combo player, 12.5 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3. He's able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. It's an Austin P team that might not be masters on the glass, but still, they're a top 225 team with regards to rebound percentage. Teams are shooting less than 30.5% from 3-point range against them, and for UMKC, they're just not going to be able to get anything going whatsoever from the outside, especially with just the overall, shall we say, lack of guard play that you've only got one guy on the roster that's been able to give you over 11.5 points per game, and Jason Petty, and he's been able to give you 12 points, shoots 30% from 3, which is actually above average for this team, but typically UMKC makes their bones down low. You've got Chris Dockery along with Jerome Palm, who've been able to combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game between the two of them. You get just under 14 points per game, but those turnovers have been very costly with this team, and for UMKC, they're just absolutely getting lambasted inside, outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, actually doing a respectable job in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and you do have a UMKC team that has been okay in terms of generating turnovers. I'm not going to call them amazing, but this is a Kansas City team that is in the top 150 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. If you look solely at their home numbers, they've been a top 75 team with this regard, so I do think that this is going to be a sloppy game, but with Austin P all of a sudden getting a little bit more out of Rashad Marshall, he comes over from Arkansas State. He's been able to get this team a lot more on the glass, had a slow start to the season, up to about 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. He's going to be a difference maker, and a big reason why I'm going to be willing to lay with Austin P. Made them an 8.5-point favorite, so laying it with Austin P in on the under semi-total 136.5, 306.603, 306.604. Morgan State is on the road against San Francisco. The Dons are a 25.5 to a 26.5-point favorite. 147.5 is the total, and made my total a 144.5. I'm in on the under. You just have a pair of teams that are not pushing a lot of tempo right now. With Morgan State, they're checking in about 207th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. San Francisco is down to about 320th, and this is a San Francisco team that year in and year out has been pretty rock solid with regards to their defense. Really not doing it in terms of turnovers. They are 348th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and it is a San Francisco defense that's taken a little bit of setback to about 162nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Morgan State is just getting absolutely dump truck. They're about 344th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Morgan State has a little bit more size in the past year, so won't take the points with them as a 22.5-point underdog. 7-footer Christian Oliver has been able to give you about 6 points. Need more than the 3 rebounds per game, but that backcourt of Elijah Davis and Alfred Worrell have been able to combine for about 27.5 points per game. Neither of these guys give you anything from 3, and Morgan State is looking to push the ball inside. Morgan State is a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range for good reason, because they're shooting 27.2% from 3-point range. That's a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Rob Lawson has been solid with giving you about 5 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game, 13.5 points per game, and for Morgan State, they have been a top 275 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Morgan State a little bit more respectable on the glass. They become a top 275 team in terms of rebound percentage, but where they really went wrong on defense is they're outside the top 350 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that San Francisco is going to be able to eat that up quite a bit. For San Francisco, not necessarily the most amazing 3-point shooting team. You've had Ryan Beasley be able to come in, give the team about 13.5 points per game, but he's dealt with a little bit of ailment, should be good to go in this one. David Fuchs has been a little bit in and out of the lineup as well, but did return in their most recent game against Loyola Chicago at 20 points, so he should be all good to go there. He's been their main rebounder with 6.7 rebounds per game. Bookie Cook, a former top 75 recruit, 10.5 points, 5.5 boards, a little bit over block per contest, good shiftiness there. San Francisco overall, they shoot about 36.5% from 3, but they have been outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with them not generating any turnovers whatsoever. That should allow Morgan State to feel a little bit more at home, though I do think that this is going to be a slow down game where Morgan State does just enough to hold in there. I set my line at 22.5, so taking the points with Morgan State, set my total at 144.5, so also down the under. We wrap things up with 306, 605, 306, 606. Pacific plays those Nichols. Let me be specific. When I say Pacific is a 9.5 point favorite, 141.5 to 142.5 is the total, and made my total a 138.5. I like the under. You've got a Nichols team that's outside the top 260 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Nichols a very mid-tempo team, about 187th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pacific has slowed themselves down quite a bit, 285th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I've just been really impressed by this Pacific team on defense. 24th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage at home. Only 17.1% of opponents' missed shots result in an offensive rebound. Now, for Pacific, 335th in terms of points per possession at home, 210th overall, but at home, they're also 15th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a Nichols group that just hasn't been able to get necessarily a ton in terms of being able to generate second and third chances outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Only one guy on the roster that's giving you over 4.5 rebounds per game. That'd be Jellic Dunkley, who's been able to give you 13.5 points, 6.5 boards. Really nice stat sheet suffer. And Nichols is always a team that's been pretty rock solid with regards to generating turnovers, back in the top 75 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they gamble for turnovers. They are outside the top 275 in terms of 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. As a result, Trey English has upped his scoring. He and Jalen Seals have been able to combine for about 28 points per game with Surreals. He shoots 38% from 3, English less than 30% from the outside, but with this Nichols team, they just don't have a lot of shooting in general. They are outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and for Pacific, they're going to have the most versatile player out there on the floor. That'd be Elias Rolfe. He's back for another season with his coach Dave Smart, who came on over from Carleton College out there in Canada, and Rolfe has 16.5 points, 6.5 boards at 6'7", shooting 43% from 3-point range. Jaden Clayton, the transfer from Maine, has done a nice job doling it out, 8 points, 5.5 assists, only about 2.5 turnovers per game. It's a Pacific team that they are outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, turn the ball over darn near 13 times per game, but with them being able to grab so many second and third chances and not allowing opponents to grab so many second and third chances, and the way that they do a great job in terms of guarding the arc, top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, I think in a defense-oriented game, Pacific able to get the job done, especially with Isaiah Jack down low being able to give you about 6.5 boards to help out with regards to that low post play as well, and I do think that Alexis Marmioles has been largely a disappointment coming over from Lamar, only about 5 points per game. He starts to get it going a little bit more as well, so in on the underside, I told 138.5, and South Pacific has a 14.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay it, and that wraps things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to our guy, Nate Hornung, better known as Shaggy Bets, for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @G_81. Keep in mind, large DM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
DC politicians want to enact harmful credit card mandates that could take away your cash back and rewards points. Perks that stretch your budget and make life a little easier. Losing these benefits means less money for your family's everyday essentials like gas and groceries. The perks you rely on could disappear, leaving you with higher costs and fewer options. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.